Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Super Show podcast, episode number 213. I'm your host for this week, Jamie, and you are joining us in the aftermath of one of the biggest weeks that gaming has to offer, and joining me to break down all the latest and greatest reveals and updates from around the industry is my brother in arms, no trademark, don't come after me, Ubisoft, Mr. Alex Jones. How are you, sir?
I am very good, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you, Jamie, recapping Key 3, as it's been lovingly dubbed. I'm just aware, I always get this wrong, like when I try and position myself in my camera, I have to remember that I always move the wrong way to get myself in the middle. I need to be over here, and I was moving over here. And I was
do you not have your full frame on stream? I suppose I should have looked that up at some point, but...
Yeah. No, I have my full frame. Are you calling me full framed? Is this what you're trying to do?
I mean the full frame that your camera picks up. In which case, why would it matter where your head is?
Oh, so
people can see all of it.
Because if I'm looking at you and talking, and then I slide over here, then
I'm gone. I see. That's a little visual gag that you may have missed if you were listening to the audio podcast. And I'm not here to bully you into watching or listening to the kind of version of this podcast that isn't your preference. But if you are listening to this on a podcasting platform of your choice, maybe you're over on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts right now, then you can, of course, come and see our faces. We're over on YouTube. You can catch the VOD at any point that you'd like. But, of course, if you want to join in with the live stream, we do blast this out across the airwaves sometimes Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday. I'm just going to say every week. At SuperShow Pod is the handle, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Twitter. But like I said, if you just want to listen to our voices, I can't blame you. But you can do that also at Paisley Radio, paisleyradio.com, Thursdays at 10 p.m. if you ever wanted a slightly different listening experience. And with that, Jonesy, with all the housework out the way, is that what people say? We probably should get
housekeeping.
More housekeeping.
Housework.
Housework is housework.
I like it.
They're in the same vein, right?
Yeah, no, I like it. I like how you've got to do your housekeeping, but you do it by doing some housework. I like it.
Yeah, like on the weekend, I did some housework. Housekeeping is what like a cleaner says when they're knocking on the door in an American hotel during a rom-com where the male lead in the film has just found out all his clothes have fallen out of a window and he's stuck there naked and he's holding his groin in a comedic manner and you hear a knock on the door and it says housekeeping. I'm glad. Like, oh no!
I'm glad you did it because I was really tempted to like do an accent. And I was like, I'm not sure if I should.
Oh, and you would have done a Mexican accent because in your head, in an American comedy, every person that works in a hotel is Mexican because that's the kind of person you are.
Yeah, they always are. That there was what's the Family Guy joke with the
is she called Consuela?
You'll buy.
Superman noise here.
But they always in American stuff they do because this is what's weird because in American stuff they're always Mexican. In the UK they're not anything in particular. Like they're any cleaner could be anything. Like I don't think there's a type. In America they always go. It's always the Mexican thing. But then do you know what's really bad? Let's get political. I saw a clip of Ozzy Osbourne's daughter. Is it from a while ago?
Yes. Yeah, Kelly Osbourne.
And
I know.
She was talking about Donald Trump, and she was saying how if Donald Trump does XYZ, then people won't be here to clean his house. And everyone toilets, and everyone massively laid into her because they were like, "What? Why are you picking on these people to call them cleaners?" And as a Brit, it's a little bit weird because we don't really have that social like thing. There's not a group of people that do a thing like. A certain group do this. Although we do have Polish builders who you often hear are much better.
At this point, I'm just going to interject and say this is a podcast all about video games. If you came here for politics, I'm going to have to deeply disappoint you and instead recommend
we are two of the most
podcast.
Ill-informed people on politics you can probably come across.
Especially when it comes to cleaners. But what
never
we are
had
slightly...
one. Never had one.
Well, there you go.
Can't afford it.
That explains why you think they're all Mexican.
I didn't say that.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I read the comments of this video
said
and someone summarized everything that you've been saying, and that was the big key takeaway. The good news, though, for anyone watching or listening, is that we are slightly more informed on the topic of video games. Not by much, but ever so slightly. And the summer of games is now essentially over. The games media and games industry personnel that flocked to Los Angeles have all now retreated back to their respective homes. Jeff Keighley has already had multiple nights to cry himself to sleep over the results of his Twitter polls, reminding him how out of touch he is with the still ever-growing audience for the showcases he puts on. And it's those showcases that are largely going to be the subject of the next few hours of podcasting. We've basically got the Summer Game Fest, the Xbox Game Showcase, and the Ubisoft Forward show from Monday that we kind of have taken as almost the big three, with all due respect to your day of your devs and your Devolver Digitals. But we're going to break down almost all of the announcements at those shows, offer some insights onto some of the big reveals that were shown there. We've also played in some shape or form, or seen more of some of the games that pop up along the way, so keep an ear out for some extra informed opinions. And maybe a few hijinks, who knows, Jonesy? When it comes to the Summer of Games, anything's possible.
Anything is possible, but right now, what is possible is that I'm going to give a shout out to some people that are joining us on YouTube. I would like to give a shout out to Magni, to Wesley, to Chris, Rodrigo, Siebing, and Bill Caesar. And I also have to say, Siebing has said that is going to be listening to us whilst doing a bit of cleaning. So there you go. Also, I've got a question coming in. This came in super early, so I'm gonna frame it as something that we can keep in the back of our minds when we get on to talking about it. But Chris wants to know what games that were in the Xbox showcase that we think will be coming to PlayStation 5, and should I get an Xbox or just wait? So right now you should wait, and when we get to the Xbox section, we talk about the Xbox Studios showcase, then we can maybe talk about that.
Yes, we will. I guess maybe as we're going through them, we can have a little chatter about whether or not we think it's going to come to PS5, whether or not we know it's going to come to PS5, and what situation that leaves prospective purchasers of either console by, let's say, the end of 2025, which, I'll be honest, Jonesy, that if everything arrives on time and you include things that we didn't see in the last week, like GTA 6, for example, then 2025 could be pretty mega. But we start, for the sake of this evening's purposes, in 2024 with the first reveal of the Summer Game Fest. Jeff Keighley took to the stage, as he does 3 times a year now, looking a little bit more casual than usual. It was kind of like a crushed velvet sort of jacket. The shoes didn't appear to be sparkly. I don't know if you caught anything that I didn't on that front.
I think they were just pretty cash, some nicely kept trainers. I don't think they were sparkly or special, really. I was a bit surprised.
I wonder if he almost, not, I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but he almost dressed down to match the theme of the show. Because I think one thing that is interesting to note about this year's Summer Game Fest was, before he dove into the games and the reveals and the world premieres, he kind of bookended, I guess, the show by reminding us all about the state of the industry at the moment and how precarious things are for many people in the games industry out there around the world at the moment. But that also that there is a kind of an underside to that story, and the kind of the resolutes of and the strength and the success stories coming out of independently developed games. At one point, I think he pulled up a list of the top 10 best-selling games on Steam year to date so far, and I think 8 of the 10 were considered independent titles, or not published by traditional big AAA game publishing names.
Yes.
And he then also mentioned a couple of times, every time a game, for example, was developed by one person or developed by an incredibly small team, he made a note of pointing that out. The cynic would say, Jonesy, that was him kind of looking at the lineup that he had and kind of like working the show around it. But the perhaps slightly more generous and optimistic and nice way of looking at things is that Jeff really does actually want to shine a spotlight on smaller devs and shine a spotlight on some of the more positive things that are going on in the industry, especially in the face of those reports prior to SGF about 250k per minute trailer slots.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one, but I think it was. I wasn't quite sure, like the setup of that was, and don't get, I absolutely love the fact that they're focusing on more independent studios and things like that, and to not just say everything has to be AAA. But it was a bit of maybe it was like a way for him to say, hey, look, that's why I've got some smaller people on here, and that's why I'm talking more indie stuff, and we don't have all this massive AAA things. I almost thought it was maybe a way for him to say, just wait and see what these games can do in the future, because these might be the Steam top 8 games of next year, of the year after. Like, don't worry too much about the fact that my showcase is a little lacking when it comes to like the epically big AAA titles. Maybe that's unfair, but I think maybe that's what he was angling for. But do you know what? Jeff's right. I think that's what in the last sort of year or couple of years, there have been some real surprising hits, and even going back further than that. Obviously, we'll talk about the Among Us team a bit later on, and you know what they were talking about. But they were a tiny little team, 3 people in a bedroom, like over COVID, who put out one of the biggest games of Jesus. I don't even know, probably the last decade or so.
Indeed, they did. Although it was interesting to see Jeff open the show with chatter about independently developed video games and small teams and one man or one woman or one person teams, and then immediately fly into the very first reveal of the show, which was a partnership between Sony and PlayStation and Lego. So read as multi-billion-dollar corporations. But it does look like a hell of a lot of fun. This was Lego Horizon Adventures, which puts Aloy, of all people, into a rather bright and colourful looking Lego world, based, of course, on the Horizon games that she stars in. Co-op start to finish, and I think the other thing that's notable about this is that when it drops later this year, it will be coming to PC and Nintendo Switch as well, which tells you a little bit about the way PlayStation are kind of positioning this game and the audience they think it could reach. I thought this was a weird one. I've got questions, but it's not an unwelcome surprise.
No, it's one of those things where you're like, I didn't know I wanted this until it was announced, and then it was announced, and had to have a look at it, and I was like, oh yeah, like that sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like something I would absolutely want to get my hands on. It's two things that sort of go together. I think Lego games have sort of gone up and up in my estimations over the years. Like I've having kids and stuff as well. Like I've played a lot of them in the last few years, and the newer ones are very good.
Yes,
and putting those two things together sounds very cool to me. But like I said, completely didn't know anything about this. Very big surprise. Really looking forward to it. But it was a weird kind of thing to open the show with it, because we had no idea about it, and I didn't know I wanted it. But yeah, like I think you said, it's some big names. It's Sony, it's Horizon, it's Lego. You put those things together, and it feels like a big opener.
Yes. It's like it does and it doesn't. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Because it's kind of tricksy, because it's not that big an opener in the world of video games, really, but it feels like it's massive.
I think the thing that's kind of like nagging me is the Horizon element. And if you had told me that PlayStation and Lego were looking to get into bed together in a business sense, I would never have guessed that this would be the output. And sometimes it does seem like there's a weird discrepancy between how big Horizon actually is and how hard PlayStation push it, and how many like diehard Horizon fans you actually ever meet or talk to or see online. Like a lot of people really like Horizon, but it's also
it's very good. It's great.
But why not Lego Uncharted? And I know that Uncharted isn't as relevant a franchise for PlayStation in their current portfolio, but I don't know. I think it makes so for example, earlier in the year we had Lego and Fortnite coming together to make something like pretty cool that was unexpected. I think that when you're talking Lego, you've got to be talking sort of interesting things to build and interesting vistas and, you know, cool concepts. And I think putting all those things together, like an Uncharted Lego game I think the storytelling of that has to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because at the end of the day, it's still going to be a mostly story-led Lego game with so I've played all the Jurassic World Lego games, and you still need the story. Or I played the Star Wars ones. You still need all that story to do a lot of the work. Star Wars less so, because there's so much with regard to like ships and sci-fi stuff. But I feel like Uncharted's going to be a lot harder prospect, whereas Aloy, like Lego dinosaurs, it just makes sense to me. Like it's going to be so much easier to wow people with less input on the story front. And I'm not trying to be mean about it like that. I'm saying I think the visual element can do a lot of the work. Yeah, you're right, and the Lego kind of crossover makes sense in the way that I think Horizon has already had some Lego sets, and it's not hard to see the appeal of building big, complicated robot dinosaur Lego sets. Like I
Yeah.
don't know which ones they've explored already in that territory, but
They did the disc-headed big what's it, like a brachiosaurus with a disc for a head? I can never remember what it's called. I know
I don't
they
know what
did.
they're called
They
either.
had one of those, and they could get, but they're very expensive. I didn't get
I
wanted to get
mean,
it, didn't get it, but
that's just Lego nowadays.
yeah.
I mean, I thought the same way when they did all those Mario collabs, and I would look at all that stuff and say, yeah, that's really cool. I could definitely put that on a shelf, but I'm not paying those prices. Um,
I can tell you
so yeah,
the tall neck is one
the
of the ones they
Toolnet,
did.
yes. I just remember them as like their versions of the classic open world towers, except they move.
They
And
do,
so it's
yeah.
more of a puzzle to find out how to get on top and how to climb it. Um, so yeah, Lego Horizon Adventures, no firm date yet. One of a number of games we're going to discuss today that we know is going to come later in 2024, but we don't know exactly when. But yeah, I guess as I said earlier, Nintendo Switch, another platform that's coming to, no brainer when you think about the Lego kind of element. But it is going to be kind of fascinating to see a PlayStation IP, even one looked at through a Lego filter on a Nintendo device. But then I suppose that's just something we're going to have to get more and more used to as the years roll by and exclusivity becomes more and more of a weird word. We then moved on to something that didn't really make much of a rub on me, though, Jonesy, but I can imagine there's definitely a corner of the internet out there that were very happy because after 13 years, we are finally getting a sequel to No More Room in Hell, the cleverly named No More Room in Hell 2 from the Chivalry devs. Um, I'll be honest, I watched that trailer. I appreciate what it's doing. I'm sure it's going to be a hit on Twitch. The survival elements, the zombie elements, the horror elements, but not really for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yep. Also, probably not really for me, but Harry Potter Quidditch Champions coming out September 3rd on consoles and PC. Some people were wondering why perhaps there was no Quidditch content in Hogwarts Legacy, in spite of all the other things that game managed and achieved to do when it released last year. Perhaps now we know why, because there was a standalone Quidditch game in development, and it will release later this year. We also, thoughts?
Oh no, I was just wondering about that one. Like, I was interested that they went for like the look and the style they went for, and actually, I was just thinking, in some respects, I wonder if putting it into Hogwarts Legacy would have been a better idea. But it remains to be seen. Maybe not. Maybe Hogwarts Legacy's had its day, and it's a good idea to put that thing out as something completely separate. But hey,
The other thing was like Hogwarts Legacy, I think, did come out on Switch eventually, if I'm not mistaken. But I feel like
so.
I feel like that port took them a little while. There's something about the Quidditch Champions aesthetic that looks very scalable to me. And I'd imagine they're looking at that title and looking at the platforms and saying, this is a game that's going to sell best on Switch. And so, I'm not suggesting that you tone down the realism of your art style to make it more suitable for certain platforms.
I think you might be onto something. I don't know why the last few weeks I kept seeing that meme of is Mortal Kombat on Switch? Is that a thing that's come to Switch?
Yes, it's the
Homelander.
meme of Homelander, the DLC. Yeah,
his face, and on Switch it just looks terrible. And it was always like, PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and then Switch looks like a Play-Doh putty man that's been partially melted. And you think, okay, so I think maybe you're onto something there.
yeah, that Switch 2 can't come soon enough, as it turned out. We then got another look at a look at another, I should say, a team from a game from what I think might be a one-person team, the Choo Choo Charles developer, and this was Cuff Bust, which was one of the first kind of like zany, eye-catching trailers of the show, all about these weird gummy bear-looking alien mice things breaking out of jail, which I learnt from you on the night, Jonesy, was something that apparently happens all the time in Roblox. People are always breaking out of jail. So maybe that's what they're going after.
Looked like an obby from Roblox. I swear, that's exactly. And it was. I think even I said it, and then they opened the toilet door and went down a hole. I was like, oh, they've ripped this off of Roblox. It just looks nicer, but remains to be seen.
Again, if there were an audience you were going to target, the Roblox audience is not a bad one. There's a lot of them, and they apparently spend, if not their money, their parents' money, pretty freely. Also spending money freely, apparently, although this time on game development, if the visuals and the production values are anything to go by, are Ubisoft. We got a little trailer for Star Wars Outlaws. Nothing we hadn't really seen before, and if anything, it was just a little prompt, a little reminder that Star Wars Outlaws would be appearing again at Ubisoft Forward a few days after the Summer Game Fest show that we're going through now took place, where we would see a larger sort of relatively unbroken piece of gameplay, or at least sort of like a sequence that shows how that game flows. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we get to the Ubisoft Forward, because Jeff immediately moved on, and so will we, to Never. I actually don't know if I'm pronouncing that. I don't
Neva.
care if it's actually, it could be called Neva, but I want to call it Never.
I'm with you. I had the same thing with Gris or Gree from the same
developer.
developer.
This is from the same developer, so it's another very kind of serene platformer with an eye-catching animated art style. This was actually at a state of play. In fact, I take that back. I think it might have even been at the PlayStation Showcase last year. So most of you will have seen this at some point or another, even if you don't remember it. But it looks very pretty. One game that it's harder to know how it looks like because it was really just a prompt to say, hey, this exists now. Civilization 7, we got a kind of like a typically grand and pompous sort of like a cinematic, I guess, trailer, if you will, taking us through various civilizations, taking us through the history of mankind. And we know that Civ 7 is now going to come out next year simultaneously on PC and consoles, which I can't remember if that's a Civ first, but interesting again that's sort of 2K maximizing their reach for what is, I guess, probably one of their marquee franchises.
Yeah, I think it's got to be one of those things now where you'd imagine like it's going to be better for people to release as soon as possible across all platforms. Civ's not something I would ever want to play on a console, though. I must be honest. If I've got the option, I'm going to be hitting that on PC.
Yeah, it's just it's not an experience that is tailored particularly well to playing on a controller. It is very much, for me at least, a mouse and keyboard experience, and will remain as such. Something that is the total opposite of a mouse and keyboard experience, though, is Black Myth Wukong. Obviously, we've been seeing this game at shows like this for years now, and it is right around the corner. We saw a collector's edition that is apparently going to cost $400. And include a 40-centimeter figure, which I guess means that's $10 a centimeter. If I charged those rates, Jonesy, I'd be a very reasonable night out. Let me tell you.
Do you know what? Let me hold on. Let me check. I'm not being listened to. I nearly pre-ordered. Black Myth Wukong today, not the collector's edition.
Oh,
not
okay.
the $400. But and then I thought better of it. I was like, no, don't do that. It's bad. Don't do it, because it's like August 20th, I think, is the release date for Black Myth Wukong. I'm very much looking forward to it. It is not obviously the only game which is going to be dropping in that sort of time frame, so it's going to be tricky. But when you consider like Star Wars Outlaws as well,
yeah, absolutely.
But something I am really looking forward to Black Myth Wukong. It's not my usual cup of tea, but I still think that those trailers and the gameplay is doing enough for me to get excited about trying something a little bit out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's something to that. You're also familiar, or at least more familiar than I am, with the sort of Journey to the West novel and some of the things that it's drawing inspiration from. That being said, I think you've made the right call not pre-ordering. I think the thing that I always go back to is that there's no difference between a pre-order made today on the 12th of June and a pre-order made at 11:30 on the 19th of August. They are both pre-orders.
I literally, that thought ran through my head as I was sitting there and thinking about whether to do it. I was like, oh yeah, Jamie always says you can pre-order, like, it doesn't matter when you pre-order, a pre-order's a pre-order. I was like, that's so true.
People want pre-order bonuses, I get it, but like pre-order it 2 minutes before it comes out. Wait for reviews. I think
with this one, there's you can download it on the 18th and pre-install. So you could download and pre-install on the 17th. Happy days. And not do it 2 months before the fact. So I'm with you.
Right. Yeah, maybe one to see. We need to wait and see when the embargo for reviews drops and kind of plan a strategy around that. Although one thing to note, if you were planning to pick up Black Myth Wukong on the Xbox Series X or S, you will not unfortunately be able to do so at launch. Although a version for those platforms is currently in development, they also announced inside the last week that they had delayed it for the time being as they continue to work on those versions and kind of get them up to snuff and get them performing up to their standards, which I'll be honest isn't a bad thing to hear. Optimization is often a big talking point with the release of major games these days, especially ones that look as good as this. If they're taking it upon themselves to kind of take a step back and say, "Hey, we're not going to give you this product until it's ready," it's better than the reverse, which is putting it out in the wild and letting Xbox Series X and S owners find out for themselves that their hard-earned money didn't go towards the kind of product that they hoped it would. So, one to keep an eye on. Much like open world survival game Once Human, which is actually coming out sooner than many imagined. It's got a release date of July 9th. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is one of the games that currently has a demo up on Steam. I think is maybe a part of the Steam kind of Next Fest or the game, whatever they kind of call it. Okay. Not one of the demos I played, but I'm pretty sure I saw that amongst the top of the list of demos that they had going on. And then we then got another look at the next big game from the Persona devs, one that I know a lot of people will be looking forward to. Metaphor ReFantasio still remains one of the dumbest names of any video game, past, present, and indeed future. And I could not imagine a showcase of what will inevitably be a critically acclaimed RPG putting me off playing it more, because they went through the various jobs essentially that your characters can occupy, that I guess kind of act as classes in a weird way. There are over 40 of them. They will transform your characters over the course of what is probably going to be an unnecessarily long RPG. And then because it's from the Persona devs, there'll probably be some weird element where like you're also macking on teens as well, because that's just the way things work.
Why not?
Yeah.
Macking on teens.
Macking on teens. Macking on teens and JRPGs. Like name a better combo. I can name a worse combo. A new Batman game with the Arkham subtitle and making it a MetaQuest 3 exclusive.
No, come on. I was happy for this.
Jonesy, you're happy for this because you have bought a MetaQuest 3 inside the last month. I can tell you that people inside the auditorium apparently let out a groan when Keighley said the words MetaQuest 3 exclusive. That being said, we'll look at the game on its terms. You are a Quest 3 owner. Are you excited for Arkham Shadows?
Yeah, I am reasonably. I did not play I didn't have I mean, it was PlayStation VR, wasn't it? The last Batman one, and I think it came out on other platforms as well. I didn't play that, haven't played that. So, and I, as a fan of like Batman and the Arkham series, I thought a MetaQuest 3 exclusive. I'm there for that. I think it'll be it's a cool addition to the MetaQuest 3 catalog. I'm sure that it will go all VR platforms eventually. I don't know when, or we'll see how long that'll take. But then, the idea that this is the thing when it comes to VR titles, the idea that it's like you can groan it because it's coming to VR and it's not coming to another platform you want. It was never coming to a platform that wasn't virtual reality. Like these are specifically made for these things. They're like experiences. They're not 15-hour long campaign games. So you're moaning about the wrong thing. Like just be happy for the MetaQuest 3 owners that they can VR it up as the Caped Crusader.
Yes, exactly. And to go one step further than that, I think that the people developing it, I believe that the studio is just pronounced Camouflage. But it's with a J at the end. I don't know if they're entirely committed to VR going forward. But when you look at their recent games, they ported one of their original games, Republic, into VR with Republic VR. They then worked on Iron Man VR. And now they are working on Arkham Shadow exclusively in VR. So you can't even make the argument that this is development time that could have been put to use making a non-VR Batman. Like this is, like you said, you can't criticize it for being something that it's for being what it is and not being something that it's not when it was never going to be that other thing.
Do you know the way I would think of it is imagine you'd seen a Batman game which was a turn-based like isometric like point and click game, and then groaning that it's not a Batman Arkham game. Like it's not the same thing. It's a different genre. It's for different things, for different people. It's made different. It's not the same. Don't worry about it.
Different frogs, different times, different drinks, different needs. And I've got a need in my life, Jonesy, for a medieval hack and slash co-op roguelike. So it's a good thing that Tears of Metal was announced during Summer Game Fest. Right before, we also got a look at a game that popped up more in the YouTube chat than I anticipated it would, because I constantly underestimate the size of the audience for it. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, which we now know is officially coming out on October 11th. From what I understand, and again, as someone who is a real outsider on this front, this is a Dragon Ball fighting game that is sort of, I think, part of the same lineage that goes back to some of the fighting games on the PS2. I know there were games like that one that was Dragon Ball Fighters or Fighter Z. I don't know if you're meant to pronounce the Z.
Yeah.
That had that Guilty Gear kind of like animated art style that looked really nice. But I think this is more of that. I want to say the word Budokai, but I don't know if I'm making that up.
I don't know. The issue with me with these ones is I don't know if I've played a couple of the Dragon Ball Z fighting games, and some of them are actually fine. Like they're pretty traditional sort of like Street Fighter-esque fighting games, and then you get the other type, right, which are the flying in the air, flying around, blasting each other. And I found the last one of those.
I think this is more of that.
I think it is as well, and I found the one of those that I played borderline unplayable for me. So I will not be partaking. But yeah.
I won't either, but I'm happy that Dragon Ball fans are getting their Dragon Ball fix. And you know what else I'm happy about? A dev that has the balls, the gall, to put an exclamation mark in the middle of their video game subtitle. Sparking exclamation mark zero.
Ballsy. Very ballsy.
It makes me want to say it different. It makes me want to say Dragon Ball Sparking Zero.
It's tricky. Because where do you put the emphasis?
How would you do it? Let's say you're auditioning for a role, you're Villager 1 in an upcoming feature film, and your only line is Dragon Ball : Sparking exclamation mark zero.
I'd give it some Dragon Ball Sparking Zero.
Oh, folks, if you're listening, this guy can actually be hired. Reach out to him on Twitter, and he will do filthy things with that mouth for the right money.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of doing filthy things for money, war is constantly a topic in video games, and that is no different in the case of Delta Force Hawk Ops, which has a PC Global Alpha coming in July. I see this game advertised on social media an awful lot. I believe it is free to play, which probably explains why. And I'll be honest, the showcase they did for Delta Force Hawk Ops itself didn't do much for me, but they moved on to the second part of the segment, which appeared to be a licensed tie-in to the Black Hawk Down movie, which, as you and I said on the night, is a great movie. And that actually could potentially be interesting.
Yeah, no, agreed. I don't think I would have been that interested in sort of necessarily playing Delta Force Hawk Ops as a standalone thing. But when you tie in the fact that you can play Black Hawk Down, I was like, okay, that's actually it's a really good get, and B, it's something that is going to bring in a whole audience that maybe wouldn't have considered it. And yeah, I'm one of them. And it looked decent. It looked like a good war sim kind of game. So why not? Why not give it a little try?
Absolutely, yeah. I love the idea that like a tie-in to a now 23-year-old movie is going to bring in a massive, just all the Josh Hartnett fans that weren't sure which FPS game to play next now have their answer.
Josh Hartnett, man, like Lucky Number 11.
What a heartthrob, eh?
Lucky Number 11 and and Faculty, phenomenal films.
Faculty is not a film I've thought about in quite some time. That was like I think I was born in '93, so I was just young enough that like if Faculty had come out like 3 or 4 years later, it would have been in the rotation of things that I watched when me and my friends were watching things we weren't old enough to watch. But as it was like just before that.
I saw Faculty twice at the cinema.
Wow.
And me and my mates loved it. And we were like, well, that's so cool. Because Zeke, his name was Zeke. It was like, Zeke's so cool.
That is a sick name.
Yeah.
Have you seen Oppenheimer yet?
I have seen Oppenheimer. Do you know what? I've seen like 3/4 of Oppenheimer. I need to finish it.
Okay. I was going to say that one thing that was nice about Oppenheimer was seeing Josh Hartnett back on the big screen again and not looking remotely out of his depth. So shout out to Josh Hartnett.
Yeah.
We're heartnet heads over on this podcast, and if you're not a heartnet head and you're listening to this, then leave, and then immediately come back because we have more games to talk about, like Fatal Fury: City of Wolves dropping in 2025. We got a little look at Battle Crush, which is coming into early access in June. It's June now. When does that mean Battle Crush is coming into early access? Your guess is as good as mine. And then Mecha Break, the game we actually saw twice across the course of the week, which is getting a closed beta in August of 2024. Then, Jonesy, we kind of took a bit of a sidestep into one of the more interesting segments, I'd say, on the whole night, as a couple of representatives, including, I believe, Steve Blumhouse himself, of representatives of Blumhouse Games, I should say, which is the newest arm of Blumhouse Films, who were behind such hits as the Five Nights at Freddy's film and Paranormal Activity. Basically, in the last sort of I don't even know what time frame to give, 15 years or so, if you've seen any low-budget horror film that somehow also grossed $100 million at the box office, there's an outside chance that it was produced by Blumhouse Films, who, like you said, are now expanding into video games. And they're doing so by coming out with a slate of independent horror games. It looks like what they've basically done is they've kind of taken the same approach that they applied to their film slate and applied it to their game slate, which is like, we're going to approach or seek out or find interesting or unique creators with a strong vision for something that maybe hasn't been seen in that space before, can be made on perhaps a slightly slimmer or tighter budget than video games might traditionally be made on, and hope that it pays dividends on the back end when it maybe becomes the next big thing. And if we, again, kind of like what we said at the top of the show with some of Jeff's statements, Jonesy, if we look at this in the most charitable way possible, as, you know, a film studio coming into video games and giving people a platform to make the kind of games that they might not have been able to make otherwise, then this is a good thing, a positive thing.
Absolutely. I think we talked about it at the time when they came out and said they were announcing Blumhouse Games. We sort of, talked over their model for films, and we said, oh, that is actually a great model if they bring that to video games. And then I think they actually then did specify, hey, look, we want to bring our model to video games. And the reality of that is that you're going to get a lot of smaller independent creators who have good ideas, interesting ideas across genres, all under the sort of the umbrella of horror, however loosely you want to frame that, and to be given the money to make that, and not in the sense of, because I think often when you have games and publishers take a punt on them, there's sort of this maybe like a fear or a possibility if you think, oh well, if they buy up that IP and then it doesn't work, they're gonna do away with them, and then maybe they won't do that in the future, etc., etc. But I think the difference thing with Blumhouse is, no, their entire model is that they know that 90% of their stuff isn't going to make any money, because they know that 10% is going to go gangbusters. And because of that model, that sounds really good to me with video games. That sounds like a model that's going to give some small producers and some independent people the ability to produce content that they want to produce, almost not risk free. There's obviously always some risk involved, but that does sound pretty cool. And it's not going to scare Blumhouse off if a lot of those games don't hit and don't make a massive profit. They're probably just going to keep on doing it.
Because like you said, when it comes to their film slate, they are used to the hit and miss process that they have to go through, and the idea that one hit film in that case, or game now in this case, can account for 9 other misses and make them all essentially worthwhile. But you're right, when you look at the key takeaways, like, it's a platform for creators and video game developers to make games that they otherwise maybe wouldn't have been able to get funded or make, or would have had difficulties doing so. And also, kind of, it promotes this idea of, admittedly within the context of a genre that I haven't always gelled with, which is horror, but let's look for new kinds of experiences, and let's platform or promote the kinds of games that we haven't necessarily seen before, or that haven't appeared that often in the mainstream. And I think those are both positive things. I also wanted to give a particular shout out to something I presume that's very early because it's only referred to as Project C, but that was slated as being as from the minds of Sam Barlow and Brandon Cronenberg. Sam Barlow of Half Mermaid fame, who most recently worked on Immortality and in the past Her Story and Telling Lies, lots of kind of live action or FMV focused games. Also wrote one of the like better liked recent slash not so recent Silent Hill games. And then Brandon Cronenberg, who for a long time was just David Cronenberg's son, but his last two films, Possessor and Infinity Pool, both been very strong outings that have kind of put him in his own lane and sort of marked him out as away from the shadow of his very successful father. So curious to see what those two cook up together.
It also, the thing about Blumhouse in general, it's also sort of opens up avenues for Blumhouse films that do well, or Blumhouse games that do well, to then feed into the other side of the media. So yeah, if you get a film that does particularly well and would lend itself to being made into a video game, it just became a hell of a lot more possible that Blumhouse are going to give you a game to go along with your film that you enjoyed, and like vice versa. And you've only got to look at films and game series like Resident Evil, which is one of the biggest media franchises I think ever, like crossover into video and game, that's made an absolute packet over the years. And I'm sure Blumhouse wouldn't mind scraping a little bit of that wealth pool.
Oh, for sure. But that just gave me a really weird like mental image of. So do you remember how obviously Street Fighter started as a video game?
Yeah.
And then we had in the 90s we had a Street Fighter film with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then they made a game based on the Street Fighter film. They made Street Fighter the movie, the game.
Oh, I don't remember the movie of the game.
There's a video game called Street Fighter the movie.
Right.
And it's just a bad Street Fighter game. And so like I'm now got in my head of, because Blumhouse have already adapted a video game in the form of Five Nights at Freddy's, which was very successful at the box office. And in fact, the CEO, when he was on stage, confirmed that the sequel is already in development. I'm now imagining like Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie, the game, like just that full circle thing.
Was it because Five Nights at Freddy's was a game before it was a movie, right? Like long before.
Yes, So Blumhouse were the company that made the recent film adaptation that did very well at the box office.
With what's the lad from Hunger Games? I can never remember his name.
His name is Josh Hutcherson.
That's it.
That film made $297.2 million at the box office from a $20 million budget.
Wow. There's Blumhouse for you. That is Blumhouse all over. But yeah, no, and it would be really good to see a lot more of their of them doing that kind of thing. Well, only when it's relevant. Like, we don't want them to just be inundate us with movie game tie-ins because they think it's an easy cash cow. But I'm all up for seeing some good crossovers and some good implementations. Blimey, if I can even say the word, of concepts across media. I think that's it's an interesting way forward. It's a cool idea.
Absolutely. One to watch in the future. We then, though, got a look at another, and what feels like it's been a string, depending on how far you go back, of arcadey co-op beat-em-up games based on famous licenses, this time in the guise of Mighty Morphing Power Rangers Rita's Rewind, which I don't have much nostalgia for Power Rangers, but I know there are a lot of people out there whose hearts skip a beat at the mere mention of the Rangers. So hopefully, I know it's not that much to chew on when it comes to kind of arcadey co-op beat-em-ups, but hopefully it's something, and that Power Rangers fans are feeling seen right now. I forget you're not a Power Rangers guy, are you?
No. I was of a weird age when Power Rangers came out that I was like, I'm too old for this. This is for kids. And I was still a kid, but I was like, no, but I'm too old for this. But I still, because it was a thing, it was a big thing when I was like, I don't even know, I'd say 12, 13 years old, that I still have bumped into that IP a lot over the years. And actually seeing this game in that retro fighting game style, I was like, yes, I really want to play this. It's almost like it looks like it's going to be tongue-in-cheek, it's going to be comedic, like impactful, but a lot of fun, and with 3 other mates playing alongside you. Yeah, it's like a good time.
Yeah, like I have no real like nostalgia for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for what it like, and you Steph and I had a few sessions on that arcade brawler that they did for that a handful of years ago, and it was a good time. So I'm sure the same will be true for this, as may well be true, albeit with a few more tiers along the way, for cinematic platformer Deer and Boy, which does have quite a striking style, I will say. We then also got another trailer for a game that I remember when, obviously, it was quite a big deal when it got announced, but I hadn't really seen in any proper shape or form until this trailer, and that was Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Obviously, the first game, after being, I think it was Kickstarted or crowdfunded to say the least, went on to become a real kind of, dare I say, cult hit. I think it was sort of straddled that line between cult hit and actually quite mainstream hit, where a lot of people kind of talk about it in sort of different circles, but also when you look at the numbers, it probably sold millions of copies. And as such, a lot of people are very much anticipating and looking forward to Deliverance 2. And I would say this was a really interesting trailer in that it was slightly raunchier than I expected a medieval RPG to be. Plenty of swearing, and I know they did plenty of that back in the day, but it actually made quite a strong impression, I thought.
I don't remember the trailer for this at all. Like you
Oh,
said
really?
that.
I was teeing you up because I thought that it wasn't on your radar at all, and it kind of was afterwards. So, Kingdom Come Deliverance is the first person medieval RPG that I remember saying to you at the time I thought was notable because a lot of first person RPGs with medieval influences obviously work fantasy into it, and you're expecting like a Elder Scrolls or Game of Thrones style twist at some point where a dragon comes out. But no, this is very traditional sword and shield, people swilling ale and swearing at each other and
sorry, yeah. Okay. No. Do you know what? Actually, yeah, the trailer for this, I wouldn't have. I've obviously heard about Kingdom Come Deliverance over the years, and I've never really wanted to play it that much. This, I remember now. This trailer was much more interesting to me in the sense of it seemed, as you've said, it seemed like a trailer which was pushing a narrative-led first-person medieval game that was actually set in a time when it doesn't just go to orcs and dragons. Yeah, and I think yes. We did. We talked about it at the time, and it was almost like some two brothers arguing and being a bit, like you said, raunchy, sweary, getting their beer on and just having a good time. And I sort of thought, not what I was expecting. And actually, it looks like they're trying to put together a good narrative game in a cool world that you can really get your hands on and enjoy. And it is the first time I've actually even thought about getting or jumping into Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I completely blanked on the game and the trailer until you reminded me of it.
There was a moment there where I was teeing you up, saying, "Oh no, I remember Jonesy kind of making note of this."
It looked very cool. Yeah, it did.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I should add. I know that's a couple of times now I've referenced that Jonesy or my's reaction to seeing this live as it happened and seeing these things being revealed. I should mention at this point that Jonesy and I did actually do live reactions to both the Summer Game Fest showcase and the Xbox Game Showcase. So if at any point you want to go back and see our faces and hear the things we said in the moment, mere seconds after these things were revealed before our very eyes, then you can do so on the YouTube channel. Just check the live section and you can find VODs of both live streams there. They were a good time. So if you're looking for something to fill the gap and you've already listened or watched this week's podcast 4 or 5 times already, then maybe head over there and get yourself an extra bit of content. And thank you, by the way, to everyone who tuned into those live or after the fact. They were great fun. Because you can see the bemused and confused expressions on our faces as we were greeted with trailers for games like Slitterhead, which is coming out in November from the twisted mind of the creator of Silent Hill, which is, I'll be honest, Jonesy, based on the gameplay I saw, just about the only thing that this has going for it was that it's from the twisted mind of someone noteworthy.
Do you know what I remember about this trailer? Was the fact that you referenced the fact that that's what you call your penis. That's how much this stuck in my head.
There you go. Nickname, for jokes like that, check out the live stream VODs. But yeah, Slitterhead, it's a pet name. I wasn't going to make that public, but there we go. Also, for what it's worth, I really hope I get to the stage in my career as a creative that I've made things in the past that allow my future projects to be introduced as from the twisted mind of from the twisted mind of Alex Jones. It's like,
imagine if it was from the.
That just meant you made one kind of slightly out there, quirky, probably horror project from the twisted mind, from the fucked up, twisted.
Yeah, how twisted is twist? What do you have to make to get them to call it your twisted mind? I want them to come create a new term because it's so wrong. They're just from the I don't even know from the
Yeah, like imagine if someone gets locked up in like an asylum, or someone's like legitimately insane, like, from the twisted mind of a criminally insane psychopath.
Oh, that would be good though, wouldn't it? That would get people interested, like deviant art.
Mate, do you know what you could do? That what you could do is you could go to an asylum and start interviewing the people there and like asking them for game design ideas and say this game was entirely conceptualized by people in an asylum.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
deviant brain of Billy Bobface.
I tell you, do you know what it would take a twisted mind to come up with? It is an entire property and web series and movie and now video game all about a really cool bean. And that is exactly what we got in the latest trailer for Killer Bean, made by just one man, who, to be fair, was one of the lead animators on The Matrix. It kind of looks like it's got a bit of a GTA with beans kind of vibe going on.
Bit Max Payne, yeah.
Max Payne, absolutely. There were also the reference. We saw a bit of both a first and third person perspective. Apparently, it might also be a roguelike. But Josie, before we talk too much about Killer Bean, there's one thing I need to get off my chest. I've made a discovery about Killer Bean since we saw this trailer for Killer Bean, and it's completely ruined Killer Bean for me.
Is it the type of bean it is?
It's the type of bean it is.
Is it a clitoris?
No, what? No.
They looked weirdly.
Did you thought this whole thing was a
sexualized.
clit joke?
No, I think they looked a bit like penises, and then because I think I had the joke about slit head in the back of my brain when this came on, and I was like, oh, these kind of look like weird penises, and then they're called killer beans, and I was like, oh, maybe that's like a de-hooded clitoris, and that's what it would look like, and I just don't know.
Maybe if there were a mechanic where you could flick the killer bean, and he jumped into action. No, mine was far more innocent and childlike than that. I thought he was a baked bean.
Haricot bean, I think, is a baked bean. Is that haricot bean? No, but he had a dip in his head.
Don't get all fancy hoity-toity with me.
It had a weird little dip in his head. It can't be a baked bean.
Some baked beans have dips in their head. All right, so basically what you're saying is that you were already 2 steps ahead of me and you knew he was a coffee bean. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Oh, he's a coffee bean. No, I was racking my brain.
He's a coffee bean. Jack Killer Bean is a coffee bean.
Oh, so he's trying to be... they've missed the trick there. He should have been called Joe. Because like a cup of Joe, a cup of coffee.
Jeff Liu, creator of Jack Killer Bean, if you're listening or watching, it's not too late to give Jack a long-lost brother called Joe.
Jack and Joe.
Maybe he could be integrated into the story somehow.
Coffee. He doesn't look like a coffee bean either, though. Like I thought you were going to say some weird kind of a bean from another country that sounds really fancy I'd never heard of.
Oh, like a pinto bean, like the one they always put on burritos.
Yes, or like a black-eyed bean. That's peas, isn't it? Black-eyed peas. Like I don't know enough beans. I don't know enough types of beans.
There are black beans. There's black beans. There's green beans, runner beans, string beans. Some of those might be the same thing, but Americanized. I don't actually know.
I don't know enough about. My bean knowledge is severely lacking.
I feel sorry for your wife. Anyway, speaking of women in angst, next we saw a video game that looked very reminiscent of one of my favorite video games to say out loud of last year, Jusant, except this one is called Cairn. It is also a climbing game, except this one is from the creators of Fury, with an I, and Haven. Fury notable for its absolutely banging soundtrack. And Cairn, I mean, if Jusant was kind of like a slightly more relaxed approach to climbing, and it was about the friends we made along the way, so to speak, Cairn is like, actually climbing is incredibly stressful and you can fall to your death at any point. And I'll be honest, there was a slightly more expanded look at Cairn at one of the subsequent streams. I can't remember if it was Day of the Devs or where it was, but a slightly longer look at it than we got at Summer Game Fest. And I think Cairn could be very cool. I like climbing. I want to climb in more games. Also, a game that could be extremely cool, but for reasons that are not yet apparent, I just feel like there has to be more to it than meets the eye, is Wonderstop, which appeared to be kind of like a cozy Stardew Valley-like game where you were kind of like you were farming and you were kind of like running some kind of like, was it a tea shop or a cafe of some
Coffee,
kind?
tea, something like tea. I think you're right. Yeah, and it was like,
Yeah,
well, obviously, part of the game, you've got to serve the tea as well as growing the ingredients. Yeah.
right. And there was a bit of a twist towards the end when it became clear that the character
When
suffered.
we became interested.
Well, yeah, it became clear that the character suffered from some kind of anxiety, and even then, it was like, okay, maybe you're balancing kind of the character's mental health issues versus the everyday running of this coffee shop or and the farm. But the thing that really kind of surprised us was that Wonderstop is actually from Davey Wreden, co-creator of the Stanley Parable, and also what was the other game that Davey made that was really interesting and fourth wall breaking about the creative process of making games. That's going to annoy me. I'm going to have to look it
Oh.
up. Beginner's Guide. Was it Beginner's Guide?
Oh, is that? Oh god, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's the one I've played it and I just can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, the Beginner's Guide. I was right.
Was that the one?
You may well have played it. I feel like we've talked about it on the podcast before. I'm not sure if.
Is this the really strange one where it talks about how games are made and then you keep going through the same environments but then they change and it's very trippy?
Yes, basically yes.
Yeah, then I have played it. A very strange game, like very good, very weird. Because yeah, as far as this entire narrative about a game designer who was trying to make games and was trying to make puzzles and things in games in a certain way, but the whole thing is told from the narrative perspective of a friend of theirs who wanted them to play the game and was like communicating with them, but then broke off communications. And it's obviously all narrative. It's all fictitious. Sorry, but yeah, weird thing, but really compelling. Which is funny because you look at a game like Wonderstop, and I was thinking, oh, not for me, and then you got to the end, and it's like, oh, for me, because
Right, exactly.
I just want to know what that game is.
I want to say I can't remember if I read or was listening to an interview with Davey since then, and I don't know if he's not giving anything away or what, but there's a chance he really has just what he wanted to make a cozy game, and he went to make a cozy game. It just feels like every part of me, every fiber of my being doesn't want to believe that someone involved in both the Stanley Parable and the Beginner's Guide went and made something that is cut and dry. Like he could make something that looked like a follow-up to those games, and even then I'd be like, I bet there's going to be additional layers to this. It's also published by Annapurna, who obviously, they do sometimes go down the kind of the relatively simple, cozy route, but they also have an eye for an interesting game. And I think the thing that you could maybe say about Wonderstop that's slightly negative on the surface is that if Wonderstop is as simple as it looks, then there's a lot of other games like Wonderstop both out there at the moment and in development at the moment. And so you wonder kind of what drew Davey to it as his next project, and then what drew Annapurna to it as a publisher. And I hope that the answer is that there's something wacky going on.
I think you're right, because when you look at that trailer, there was those certain elements where it was like the person, the woman who was sort of growing the ingredients and making the tea was kind of chill and cozy, but then there was this rising tide of sort of, I don't even know what, and then it would, the volume would go up, and she would sort of like be taken aback for a moment and remember something, and then it would flash back again, and it was all nice and happy. It was definitely an element of like, this is not all what you think it's going to be exactly, which is interesting.
Good, exactly. We need more games like that, and we will find out more about Wonderstop when it releases later in the year on PS5 and on PC. Next, we moved on to a paranormal mystery, as if Wonderstop didn't have some mysterious elements of its own. Unknown 9 Awakening, which we got a new story trailer for. We then saw Inotria, a game destined to be pronounced in about 4 different ways, depending on your perspective. The Last Song, which got a new trailer and an updated demo, which is also available on Steam and I think even PS5 right now. I was on the PlayStation Store, I think, last night, and I saw this there. I have not yet played it, simply because I'm also playing Elden Ring at the same time at the moment, in my own time, and I didn't really want it to add another Souls-like, if you will, to the mix. We got a release date of July 2nd for The First Descendant. And then we got, after the Blumhouse segment earlier, kind of the second interesting little sidestep in terms of the nature of the announcements, courtesy of Among Us developers, Inner Sloth, and this was something that Jonesy, you kind of gestured towards earlier. A couple of members of the team took this to the stage and announced Outer Sloth, which is essentially a video game fund, and the messaging behind this, assuming that everything is as black and white as they made it out to be, is that hey, we made Among Us, it made way more money than we ever imagined it to, and we're now going to use that money to feed back into the development of other games. And they, much like Blumhouse earlier, had a slate of games, some of which are already out in some way, shape, or form, some of which are in development, some of which are in very early development, and were actually shown off with bits and pieces of concept art shown between early gameplay snippets. And all of which are being funded to some degree with money that was raised through sales of Among Us, which it was very cool to see those devs kind of give back and go full circle on that. An unexpected move.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing thing to do to go from being sort of like an unknown small group and producing such a massive game like Among Us, and actually basically saying, hey, we're going to give other people the opportunity to do what we did. And I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Potentially also fantastic, Jonesy will have to tell you when his kids force him to watch it, the Among Us TV show, which we got a sneak peek for, and also a little look at the cast, which had some pretty eye-catching names. Patton Oswalt, top billing on that, and he is a funny man, so fingers crossed that turns out okay. I have higher hopes for it than I have for Sonic X Shadow Generations, because at this point, not only could not care any less about Sonic, but somehow adding Shadow into the mix makes things even worse. But I know that the internet will be inundated with people telling me that it is actually really good, and I just need to try it for myself. When that launches on October 25th, we got another look at June Awakening, which continues to do the rounds in the aftermath of the June films. And you know what? Having now seen both June films, it was kind of interesting to see how this trailer was playing with some of the expectations about what Awakening will do with the June narrative. It looks like it's going to potentially explore some interesting what-if scenarios that fans of the June world may well look forward to exploring, assuming they can be bothered to play an MMO, which I can't, if I'm being brutally honest. Do you know what else I don't have much time for in my life, Jonesy?
What's that?
Just because, hey, sometimes genres don't speak to me, and the idea of an RTS game for everyone is one of those. That was how the developers of Battle Aces described the game that they have coming out at some point in the future. It aims to bring, quote, the core fun of the genre, quote, like World of Warcraft did for MMOs. Make of that what you will. At one point, Jonesy, I think we both had a chuckle because they even implied that this might be the RTS game that plays itself.
It did seem like that.
So I'm not sure who that appeals to, but I've been wrong before, and I'll probably be wrong again.
Yeah, that was a bit of a strange one. I remember at the time because it was the way they said everyone can play this, and like, okay, but if you're playing making it for everyone, then it's got to be very accessible. Yeah, they did say also we've taken out the annoyance from RTS games of clicking. It's like, oh,
exactly.
No clicking.
I thought clicking was what you did. And clicking at one point in the Starfield scene I thought that was how you gauged how quickly people were doing it. But then again, what do I know? Battle Aces will probably be one of the 10 biggest games on the planet in 2 years' time, simply because we have
because it plays itself. Everyone's at work, exactly. And it just plays itself.
And do you know what? I do like idle games, and I like clickers. Although this is like a weird issue because like the contract that on one hand it is kind of an idle game, but on the other hand it's not a clicker because they're taking the clicking away.
Yeah.
This has really given me a crisis. So that's why I tend to take my mind off of RTSs like Battle Aces and put them onto things that make me feel more at ease with the world, like the destruction of buildings with sledgehammers, which is the kind of action you can get in on if you were to play the finals. And if you're listening to this, you probably haven't done that because I don't think enough people did, but it is still going, and it is going to Kyoto on June 13th. So if the idea of playing a first-person shooter that didn't appeal to you at any point in its life cycle thus far becomes more appealing because it's set in Japan, then maybe you should check that game out. One thing that I have already checked out, Jonesy, and completed all of at the time of recording is Alan Wake 2's Night Springs DLC,
nice.
Which Sam Lake took to the stage, even danced his way onto the stage to announce alongside a physical version of Alan Wake 2 for anyone who's looking forward to that. And he didn't quite shadow drop it, but he said it was going to come out within 24 hours. It did indeed drop the next day. And yeah, I've played all 3 episodes of that DLC, and I think it is good.
Only good, just good? Are we stopping at good?
I'll stop at good because I want to leave a little bit. I want to make sure there's more room before we get to the ceiling. You know?
Yeah.
Because there is still one expansion to come. What I will say about Alan Wake 2's Night Springs DLC is that it is surprisingly shouldn't say surprisingly. It is short and it is simple. It is broken up into 3 episodes, each of them, I guess, theoretically presenting as an episode of Night Springs. Night Springs being an in-universe TV show that Alan Wake himself wrote episodes for, and indeed he wrote all of these episodes. In fact, I believe the conceit goes one step further and suggests that these were episodes that Alan Wake wrote as an attempt to get himself out of the dark place that he is trapped in at the beginning of Alan Wake 2. And it means that they basically get to let their hair down and experiment with different things, different protagonists, different moods, and kind of I'll expand on that in a second. But the reason I say they're short and simple is all of these can be completed within sort of half an hour to an hour. So you're talking about at most 3 hours of content, which is fine. It's the kind of expansion or the upgrade to the deluxe edition of the game isn't particularly expensive. They also all reuse assets and areas, for the most part, that exist in the base game. They basically each of them take a kind of cordoned off part of Alan Wake 2's base map. A character that was, again, technically already in the game. I don't want to say too much and make them the protagonist. But where it really shines is in its writing, and like I said, the kind of the tone and the feel of the pieces. The first episode, I think I can't remember what it's actually called, but you play as Rose, who is the waitress in the diner in the town, and she is because these are all, rather than actually being canonical stories about these characters, it's presented that all of these stories are echoes of the characters based off things that Alan already knows and is writing about.
Right.
So it's these aren't, the extent to which the things in these episodes are actually happening is open to interpretation. It is very confusing by episode 3. But the first one, for example, Rose is the fan, and she is it's basically an episode that takes place in her own head, and she's the diner has won best pie of the year for 20 years running. She has a plaque in her office saying employee of the decade, and everyone she walks around and talks to is complimenting her. And she goes into her office, and one of those weird flapping talking fishes starts communicating. Alan starts communicating with her through that, and Alan in this is the writer, and she's got this kind of fan fiction love affair going on with him, where she's got drawings of the two of them together, and she has to come and save him from the haters. And there's this great moment where she walks out of her office and she says, "Oh, good thing I keep my accessories behind the kitchen." So as the player, you go through the kitchen, you go through this door that's slightly ajar behind the kitchen, and it's not quite like the scene in The Matrix where Neo says, "We need guns," and all the guns fly out. But you open this door and it is this pink room that is just wall to wall, assault rifles and shotguns and pistol, but she's this happy-go-lucky sort of ditzy waitress character. You pick up a shotgun, which the game tells you is now an automatic shotgun, and you immediately have something like 200 rounds. Also, when you walk out of this basically mini armory, everyone who was eating in the diner is now standing up and cheering you on to go on your mission. And one of them shouts we're going to look after the diner while you're gone, even though we won't do as good a job as you do. And all this.
I love that concept of take it about games being how you think of things in your head. Yeah, because that is the sort of thing that people would you'd think. You would have those thoughts, but they're not usually articulated in games. And the fact that there's an outlet for that in Alan Wake 2, I think, is pretty cool.
Yeah. And parts of that episode are laugh out loud. There's one line towards the end. I don't know if it's a spoiler to say it, but they are very funny. And also, in fact, I won't say it because it would remove from context. It won't sound as funny, but it is good. And it is like that's the success of this DLC kind of encapsulated in one of the episodes, which is that it is Remedy and the narrative team especially letting their hair down, like writing things that are self-contained story that don't have to be canonical, so they can kind of like be a bit more zany, lean into comedy in a much harder way. It also subverts the gameplay in a sense that it becomes less survival horror-y. Like obviously Rose in that episode doesn't have a flashlight, so like the dark light element is gone. You have an automatic shotgun with 300 rounds, and like you're fighting Alan's haters. Like
Right.
you're just mowing down. Like it's just action sequences to kind of like progress the plot. The real highlight though is episode 3, and I can't really say why, but like once you establish that like the beginning, as we saw in the trailer. Sorry, I just knocked my mic. As we saw in the trailers, it was not a spoiler to say that episode opens with the real actor Sean Ashmore on a set for being directed by the real Sam Lake on a set for a FMV video game where he plays a character who can jump between different dimensions.
Right.
Who himself then starts getting sucked into different dimensions, and like they have some real fun with that episode, and it's like it's everything right about Alan Wake 2 wrapped up in 45 minutes. Sean Ashmore clearly also has a lot of fun with it. And yeah, obviously we know from the trailer Jesse Faden is the star of the middle episode. So between the two, like this is the most like on the nose they've ever lent into the idea of a Remedy verse and playing with those characters and playing with the multiverse and like saying and like what the characters, like if you wanted to know more about Wall in Door, for example, from Alan Wake 2, you'll get some of that. It's real fun. And considering I think the upgrade to the deluxe edition of the game is I think it's £12 if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And you get all of that and you get the next paid expansion. I think there's value there.
Yeah,
especially if you like the base game. So yeah, that was Alan Wake 2, Night Springs DLC. We also got confirmation that New World, the Amazon-developed kind of MMO, is coming to consoles on October 15th under the guise of New World Eternum. Hyperlight Breaker is coming to early access later this summer. I thought that looked really quite fun and colourful, really popped on screen. Party Animals, the Gang Beasts-like game that we still haven't done a multiplayer session of, Jonesy, is getting a cart mode. And then we got one of the more unusual kind of trailers, or I guess sort of two videos back to back, that was essentially like a weird kind of comedy sketch, I guess.
This was the guy you said, I can't remember the name of the show, you said
So the guy's called Tim Robinson, and he's become very popular in recent times because of his Netflix show, I Think You Should Leave, with Tim Robinson. And it's kind of like a weird comedy skit about him being an employee, or I guess a representative of this very corporate company, and saying, hey, everything's okay and everything's fine. And then it kind of loosely transitions its way into being an update on Skate.
Right, yes.
Skate 4.
Which unfortunately was a bit of a non-update in some respects, wasn't it?
Yeah, which for a game that's been around for a while and seems to have always been in pre-alpha, and the announcement here was that it's now the PC playtests are done, or at least it's now moving on to console playtesting. There's a part of me that was just like, the Tim Robinson stuff was fun and I got a laugh out of it, but like, don't. This was one of those, and there've been a few of those across the past week, which is like, we didn't need this update. Just keep doing what you're doing, and go, like come back when you're not in a mean way, but like come back when you're ready, because we we didn't need this.
No, agreed.
Something else that a game might have needed, I would know if I played it, but it's not. I'm not gonna. Power World. It's getting its biggest patch yet, and it's called, bear with me here, the Sakurajima update. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. And there's new gear, buildings, bosses, and of course there are pals, like the community manifested. Grill it. So all you Power World heads out there can look forward to that. Just like Jonesy is looking forward to, after 4 years of waiting, the console release of Valorant that arrives on PS5 and Xbox Series S. You can play a beta next week, and I know that you are going to be first in line, Mr. Jones.
Oh, how I've been waiting for Valorant for 4 long years to come to console.
You've been writing little notes in your diary and leaving them under your pillow every night, and now finally the Valorant gods have listened and answered your prayers. Um, we got another look at Monster Hunter Wilds, which continues to be one of the most anticipated games of the next kind of 18 months, 2 years or so. Confirming crossplay this time for all platforms, which I think is going to help. Obviously, multiplayer was a big part of the Monster Hunter World experience, so that was cool to see. And then we closed. I'm not going to say prematurely, but maybe a little bit suddenly, with admittedly a cool, new, and very combat-heavy trailer for Phantom Blade Zero, which, as you pointed out to me, Jonesy, in the week, is actually playable at Summer Game Fest. A number of outlets have gone hands-on with this game and been able to describe that experience in a bit more detail. And while some parts of the trailer for Phantom Blade Zero kind of didn't look real, or you look at them and say, like, how does that play? Or like, what were the inputs that led to that animation? Does seem like there's a very real, tangible video game behind the flash of that trailer, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was one of where I think we even said it was surprising how good the trailer for it looked, and then because some people were saying that maybe Phantom Blade Zero was a little bit vaporware-y, but yeah, the fact that people had their hands on it, were playing it, and were engaging with it at Summer Game Fest, yeah, not at all. That game is coming, and it's looking good.
Absolutely. We then, just a couple of days later, moved on to the Xbox Game Showcase, which, not to kind of like get ahead of ourselves here before we go through any of the actual announcements, I thought this was a bit of a banger. I was chatting to a friend of the show, Sam Richards, afterwards, and I don't know if I was just caught up in my emotions, but I think I described it to him as one of the best showcases of this nature that I feel like I'd seen in potentially years. And then I was trying to think about something that would disprove that, and I couldn't really come up with anything.
It was very good. Like I don't think it was interesting because it ebbed and flowed nicely. It had the pacing was done well. It had some really good updates. It had some really good reveals. So yeah, I think it was a very good show. And I don't want to be like, I'm not. Obviously, Summer Game Fest itself is sort of Jeff Keighley sort of getting trailers and putting stuff together when a lot of other people are doing their own stuff anyway. So I'm not trying to compare the two. I don't think they are necessarily comparable.
I agree.
But there was some lackluster reception to Summer Game Fest itself, and then the fact that this was seemingly, very well received. It's good for Xbox for one because they needed it.
Right, like for reference, I joked at the top of the show about Jeff Keighley's polls, but he does do a poll for every single one of these shows on his Twitter that in the case of his own show, 250,000 votes. So it's, the sample size is pretty significant, and he allows people to grade the showcases A, B, C, or D and below. In the case of Summer Game Fest, 40% of people said D or below.
I think that's a bit mean, personally.
I voted. I got a tick next to C, which meant that I voted for C. I also agree. I didn't think it wasn't a banger, but like as we recapped it there were enough interesting or promising or noteworthy projects of different scales and sizes that I thought it was a show I was glad I watched.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. But conversely, Jeff Keighley's poll for the Xbox Showcase revealed that it was overwhelmingly popular with a 65.6% return for an A grade. So yeah, people loved Xbox's showcase to an even larger degree than they hated Jeff's Summer Game Fest.
I think I would have gone more down the middle. I would have said Summer Game Fest would have got a C, and I think Xbox would have got a B. And
really,
yeah, like I don't think I would have given it an A. Like an A for me would have to have been like A for me is like the year PlayStation revealed Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man 2. Like would have been one of them. And I don't
see. I think this was an A. I know what you're getting at, but I genuinely think this was an A.
Fair.
Disagree. I guess yeah. No, fair. Absolutely. Each to their own. Well, let's get into maybe why they launched. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given it is as it is, the biggest game in their entire portfolio at the moment. Now that as a result of recent acquisitions, with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. We got a new trailer for that, confirmation that it is coming on October 25th with early access for pre-order customers. There was also a 25-minute long sort of Black Ops Direct at the end of the show, which I thought made, just to get that out of the way now, I thought it all looked pretty promising. Uh, can you tell from looking at it that it is on paper the longest a single Call of Duty title has ever had in terms of development time? Not necessarily, but they are trying some new things. A brand new movement system, for example, that does look interesting. But every time Call of Duty does something new, you never know if that's the future or if that's something they're going to walk back in the part.
Right.
Walk back. And a classic example of this, one of the big talking points about Black Ops 6 is multiplayer. I apologize if I'm boring anyone with this, including you, Jonesy. But like they are really hyping up the return of an old school and traditional prestige system. And it's like having that marketed side by side with this brand new overhaul of the movement system was a stark reminder that anything that they do that is new, that doesn't work, is just an opportunity to go back to the old system in 2 years' time and use that as a selling point. So, like, are we going to be back here in 4 years going, you hated the new movement system, so guess what? Old school movement is back.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
everyone's like, oh my God, old school movement.
The old, yeah. And I hate it when they do that. I know some people get all excited. It reminds me of, when the games, they do their classic versions or they do their original maps. And you're like, that just means you haven't come up with anything good. So you've gone back.
Exactly. Yeah. But most of Black Ops 6 is looking forward. That new movement system that I mentioned, anyone that's played Max Payne 3, it is basically that. Like, you can, dive into prone and then do full 360 aiming while you're in prone without your legs always having to be out in front of you. It's kind of interesting. All that aside, though, Jonesy, we do also have an interesting and somewhat conspiratorial story and campaign on our hands, set amidst the goings-on of the Gulf War. Considering this is also going to be the first Call of Duty game to launch day and date on Game Pass, how interested are you in this year's campaign offering, considering you didn't play Modern Warfare 3?
I am much more interested in this than I was last year. I'm glad I didn't pick up Modern Warfare 3. I think that was the right call at the time. However, I think the backlash they had to some of that and what some of the fans said, I think does seem to have pushed them to try some different stuff, try some new stuff, and really put a lot more effort in again, which it looks like they're doing. And no, I thought this looked very cool.
I agree. Also looking very cool. Something that technically leaked beforehand, but otherwise was a promising new reveal is Doom: The Dark Ages, which sort of takes Doom and the Doomslayer back to medieval times. It seems like they're kind of throwing away the story that they were following through Doom and Doom Eternal and just said, fuck it. What if the Doomslayer was like, had a shield with a chainsaw around the edges of it and like shot like a weird, like a stake gun almost, like something out of Painkiller. And I'll be honest, like there were a few other kind of big OMG moments in the trailer. At one point, the Doom guy climbs into and starts to control a giant mech. At another point, he looked to have been flying on the back of a dragon. Yeah. This was bonkers and wild in all the right ways, right?
Yeah, I believe he had a gun as well that for ammo it ground up skulls and would shoot bits of bone, which is
absolutely did.
This looked phenomenal. Like if it plays as good as it looks, it'll be a hell of a game.
Yes, and another game that, again, you don't need to worry that much about whether or not you're going to risk money on finding out the answer to those questions, because I'm not going to bother pointing out every game here that's going to come to Game Pass. A lot of them speak for themselves, but most of them will, including State of Decay 3, which is back 4 years after its initial reveal. I was a little bit disappointed at first because I felt like it should look further along, and it kind of just looked like a mostly solid-looking cinematic trailer. Apparently, though, that a lot of that was kind of like, as the story of this show in many respects, that was actually real-time and with the final assets that they'll use in the game. So I'm reasonably excited for this, but I don't think either of us are huge State of Decay guys, right?
No, I'm not. But yeah. It looked nice. It looked good. I think I'm not really looking for an open world zombie game right now, but that may well change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'd be curious to see how they kind of mix up and bring forward some of the sort of survival and base building elements that also made sort of the previous State of Decay stand out from the pack. One trailer that didn't go down particularly well online, but they have kind of made up for it in a few other ways since then, was the reveal trailer for the newly named Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which featured a number of returning faces from Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. But I think what disappointed people was that they were reintroduced in a kind of what I've heard described as a Borderlands-esque way, with a kind of bright, colourful, slightly light-hearted vibe that I don't think people want associated with Dragon Age.
Right.
That said, they put out a bunch of gameplay today at the time of recording. I think there's like around 15 minutes of gameplay out there, and I think that's winning more people over. And EA are doing a lot of, not quite damage control, but they're out there putting out statements like, hey, this is a single-player game. There's no microtransactions or live service elements. Also, curiously, they've confirmed it's going to be mission-based rather than open world, which be interesting to see how that tracks, given some of the territory they covered in Inquisition and how relatively well received that was. But speaking of big open worlds, that I know one man who may well look for reasons to return to, Starfield. We got a quick look at a patch that actually arrived on Sunday night, introducing a bunch of new content to the game. But more importantly, we got a trailer for the new DLC, Shattered Space. Jonesy, you might be the only person I know in the flesh who finished Starfield. How did Shattered Space whet your appetite for a potential return?
I think I said at the time, like, Shattered Space, I think looks very good. And taking that game into a completely different place and doing, I think, a lot of the work which needs to be done with players, which is to sort of reinvigorate them from a story front, because there's certain elements of Starfield that I think people had issues with playing the game. Like, they didn't think that the game had enough going on. They don't think that it was engaging enough. But I think Shattered Space, as a more confined, more a smaller package, as it were, and something they've been working on for longer, they can obviously take a lot of learnings from the main game and refine those down. And I think Starfield was, I don't want to say like it was unfairly treated. If people wanted more from that and they didn't get it, I do think that Shattered Space could do a hell of a lot to fix some of the perceptions people have. Because at the core of it, I do think Starfield is a good game. It's just some of the stuff around the edges was not the best. And even the storytelling in Starfield, a lot of the stories and a lot of the elements that you had and the threads that you can follow were very good. Just maybe getting to those threads and joining them together and engaging with it in the way that the game works and the mechanics was a bit clunky, wasn't so great. But this takes the entirety of Starfield, takes it to a whole new universe and puts it into Shattered Space, and it is whole sort of dark, almost horror-y elements to it. And I think you even said at the time it almost looks a bit Dead Space in some respects.
Yeah, you were exploring an abandoned space station at one point, which is very Dead Space.
So no, I'm very hopeful. I don't know. Oh no, I was going to say I don't know if this would get people to play it, but if you've got Game Pass and you've already got that, I think this would absolutely be a reason to download Starfield, even if you were just going to play Shattered Space. I hope it gives it a little bump, because that would be nice. Yeah. So we'll see.
It would. Maybe time it with another big kind of patch that also just brings another update to the game. Maybe the much sought after land vehicles launch at the same time or something like that. And before you know it, you have a solid reason to reinstall that game. If you're looking for a solid reason to reinstall Fallout 76, though, and you're a fan of the recently released Amazon TV show based on that franchise, then you can now channel your inner Walton Goggins by playing as a ghoul.
This is I don't want to be cynical, but I think we talked.
I want you to be cynical. Please.
We talked before the show about will they do anything to capitalize upon the success of the TV show, and we were sort of saying it might be too soon. Don't think they'll do it. As the fact that you can wear a ghoul's skin is kind of one of the laziest ties. But maybe that's all they had time to do. I'll give them that. Maybe they didn't have time and there was other stuff going on. But yeah, this was a bit of a shameless, oh, look, you can be the ghoul from the show. There was one of them, which, yeah.
There was also... I watched an interview with Phil Spencer after this, and he was talking about Fallout. He was asked about Fallout. And he said something, I'm not going to be able to find the quote now, but he answered a question about Fallout in such a way where he implied that like Todd Howard and some of the team at Bethesda are thinking about Fallout in a way that they perhaps weren't a couple of months ago. I
Right.
really think, I really think Xbox are in a watch this space kind of like phase when it comes to their relationship with that franchise.
Haven't they just or sorry, aren't they also introducing a new map to 76, which is like the biggest expansion that they've ever done for 76 or something?
Yes,
So as
I
well
think
as this.
it's the first time it's actually getting a new area, right, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Which if you said what are the problems, I've not played 76 ever. And my knowledge of it comes from the early days when people were talking about it. But from what I understand, the thing that people are really asking for is not necessarily just a new map. Although a lot of work has been done on 76 to improve it, apparently from launch. So one of those, and we've said about it since the show. It had a massive uptick in players. 76. So I don't want it to be too disparaging, but there we go.
No, I think it will probably continue to do decent numbers. I think the real question is, what will the relevance of the where will the relevance of the Fallout brand have settled down to by the time they can get an actual project kind of out there in front of people? And does season 2 of that show, for example, have the same positive impact on the game side of things as season 1 did? Questions to be answered in the coming years. Another team though, that are hoping that having 2 numbers after 1 word is the key to creating a good video game title are the developers of Expedition 3033, which is a French RPG, I think should we say FRPG? We've got
Ooh.
JRPG. This is the
FRPG.
era of the FRPG. This looked really visually quite striking, and then I think caught us off guard when it opened up to reveal a turn-based combat system with almost some Paper Mario-esque elements when it comes to sort of timing your attacks and seemingly like free aiming some ranged attacks. But a UI as well, in kind of almost a Persona-like way, quite a striking style it had going on. I thought this made a solid first impression.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, also making a solid, I guess, second impression, for me at least. I think you and I maybe didn't see quite eye to eye on this, but that's South of Midnight, which is the upcoming action-adventure game set in the Deep South from the team behind We Happy Few. This was one of the first times in the showcase where we sort of saw a cutscene, and all of a sudden the camera was behind a character's back in a very traditional third-person perspective, and we were like, oh, we're watching someone play a game, and there's UI, and there's stuff happening, and it's not being edited anymore. And I actually thought that benefited South of Midnight overall. I really dig the art style. I think that world looks very engaging. It was nice to see a third-person action, like a third-person combat system that didn't feel like a Souls-like.
That's very true.
I was digging it.
No, I would agree with you in some respects. Like it had a stop motion claymation almost element to it. I think it looked very striking. The location, like South in America, and like the bayou and all that, and the big, oversized, huge creatures and things, all look very cool. I loved all of that. It was only when it got into the actual combat, and it was very limited, so I don't want to say too much from limited source material. I was expecting a lot more from it when you suddenly got into the combat, the gameplay. I think we even said at the time that it lent on the old trope of, oh look, you've got like an imaginary barrier, like a magical barrier stopping you time for a bit of a fight here, and and it had like the corruption elements where you've got all this corruption's taken over, and you've got to stop the corruption. And it will clear and it will look pretty again, and it was just to go from something that looked quite striking and was very interesting to sort of really. Maybe the game in itself won't, but then relying on some like PlayStation 3 era sort of stuff. Maybe that's too far.
No. I don't think it is. I was going to say, do you know what's really weird about that is I was just about to say I watched another group of creators, let's say, reacting to this showcase after we'd done it because I like to recap it, and one of them said, "It looks like a PS2 game, but I don't mean that in a bad way."
Right. Okay. Yeah. But so there's a lot of positives and only like a bit of negative from me from that aspect, but one of those ones like it's one to watch for sure, because I'm sure that what we saw was like a very limited, very slim aspect of like the combat and how that's going to work and etc. So I'm not writing it off by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all. Definitely one to keep an eye on. That got a release window of 2025, so we're interesting to see how far away we are from South of Midnight. We also got to look at the upcoming World of Warcraft expansion called The War Within, which kicks off the MMO's World Soul Saga in August. And then another trailer, but annoyingly still no date, for Konami's upcoming remake of Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, the game that they're calling Metal Gear Solid Delta for some reason. Still haven't figured out why they decided to insert that random letter. Is that the Greek alphabet?
Delta, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I actually thought I thought that looked. It's weird because it looked good, like objectively, like that was UE5, all singing, all dancing. It looked sharp, but at the same time, it had the OG kind of like voice acting, and also some of the animations looked one to one. So you have this weird sort of like contrast between these extremely polished high-end UE5 visuals and some kind of like animations and game design and dialogue that were like, well, PS2 era.
Right.
And no piss filter either, as a lot of people are pointing out. The original Snake Eater had a constant greeny, yellowy piss filter over it that has clearly been removed for the remake. So I don't know. I think though the important thing is it looks like they are. It looks like they're not going to take any risks at all when it comes to changing parts of the Snake Eater formula. I think this is going to be one of the most what's the word I'm looking for? Like faithful, I guess, remakes we've ever seen from a non-visual perspective. From a gameplay perspective, I think it's going to be extremely faithful, which I hope works for fans. Sea of Thieves, Season 13, coming July 13th. At the very least, it's coming for Xbox and PC. No mention on of the PS5 at the showcase, but that might just be because, well, why would they put a PS5 logo up on screen during an Xbox showcase? And then we also got to look at Flintlock, Siege of Dawn, which is coming out next month. And this is also one of the games that does have a demo that's out there. There's a demo on Steam. This was one of the ones I played, and I thought it was okay.
Yeah, it looked cool. It looked interesting. Nothing particularly grabbed me about it, but yeah, it looked right.
Yeah, but playing the demo was like, it played similar to how it looked. What I would say is that it had some like traversal mechanics that were introduced nice and early on in the demo that helped make it feel more like fluid and dynamic than maybe other games of that ilk. And when it comes to kind of like the balance between character action and like Souls-like stuff, this felt more like something like God of War in terms of like you don't really feel like you're playing a Soulsborne game.
Right.
But also had some very Soulsborne mechanics like, hey, you have a weapon, you have a pistol or a firearm, but it's not actually used for range combat. It's actually used for like close range combat as a way of interrupting the enemy's attacks, just like the one in Bloodborne.
Right.
And it's like, okay. But it has some other interesting ideas, like they seem like they're doing like the kind of the Souls idea of like, hey, you're getting a kind of a currency, if you will, for killing enemies that you have to cash in before you die. But they're almost Tony Hawksifying it by saying the more enemies you kill and the more different stuff you do, the higher a combo meter you build up, which multiplies the amount of those. I think they call them just call it reputation. Multiplies the amount of it you're getting, but every time you get hit, your multiplier gets reduced to 0. Right. And so it's like they're doubling down on the risk reward of kind of holding on to your souls, I guess. That was interesting. Also interesting, Age of Mythology Retold, a remake of one of my favorite RTSs of all time. That's coming September 4th. And then one of the biggest surprises I thought of the whole week, Jonesy, Perfect Dark, the reboot which we first saw, I think this was another one that might have been about 4 years ago at this point, with just a CG trailer, returned, and all of a sudden gave us an extended gameplay sequence that really leaned hard into some of the immersive sim, stealth action, and spy-like elements of the Perfect Dark formula. I thought this was a really strong way to reintroduce the world to Perfect Dark.
I don't want to say too much, but maybe this might have been my favorite looking / most anticipated game from the entirety of the Summer of Games. Like I think this
nice.
It looked phenomenal. I really enjoyed the oversaturated, futuristic bio meets sort of like urban environment that they had going on, and then the fact that they had Joanna Dark with like the scanner trying to like listen to people's conversations and pick locks and really play into the stealth elements. I would almost say it looked something akin to Stray, like the how nice the world looked and how
right, I see.
And I think that was, I wasn't quite expecting that like mashup of visual styles in in that sort of, like I said, futuristic meets lush colors and vibrant colors and things. But if those two things go together, and if it leans more on interesting set pieces, interesting mechanics, and doesn't just isn't just a stealth game with combat elements, could be absolutely phenomenal, I think.
Agreed. This was, in terms of a game that kind of went from just about being on the radar to being something that I'm really looking forward to seeing more of whenever it's next appropriate to. Right up there. Totally agreed. We also then got a cinematic trailer for the upcoming Diablo 4 expansion, Vessel of Hatred. That's releasing in October. We got a pretty gnarly trailer which involved at one point this chick's forearm split in two. It was kind of gross in the way that you'd expect a Diablo 4 cinematic to be. Slightly less gross, but no less fun, was our latest look at Fable from Playground Games. And I'll be honest with you, Jonesy, I don't know what you thought of this look at the game, but this was up there with Skate for me when it went, in the sense of, whilst I did want to see more Fable during the showcase, and I'm glad it was there, I just wanted to see a little bit more. I wanted a slightly more tangible feel for exactly what Playground are going for with this.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Although saying that, from what we did see, I was very, I don't know what the word is, but I was like, I was chomping at the bit for more, this looks like it could be really interesting. Yes. I think I'm with you. I just wanted to see a bit more of everything. But obviously, unfortunately, we can't necessarily have that. They're not ready to show that, but no. Looking.
But we did get a 2025 release date for it, which suggests that, again, if this isn't out by this time next year, then that is the next summer we're going to see. We're in that kind of hey, show us 10 minutes of gameplay kind of territory.
Right, yes.
Because every time the snippet they showed, every time we got it would fade up from black, and it's like a character walking through a town in a third person perspective, and I'm like, yes. And it would cut away to something else. I'm like, no, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see how it moved and how it worked.
Totally with you.
Yeah. So hopefully something that we get more of in the future. Also coming in 2025 is Fragpunks. And if you had told me that any 5v5 hero shooter could catch my eye during the entirety of this week, Jonesy, especially middays after Concord had those same eyes glazing over, I'd have told you're wrong. But Fragpunks does have quite an interesting hook, where essentially you're going into the game and utilizing these cards that change the fundamental kind of rule sets of the game, made it look pretty dynamic in a way that, like I said, was a lot more visually and mechanically arresting than I thought it might be at first blush.
100%. Real solid. I loved some of the ideas that they had with that game. It looked like it could be, even if you didn't play Fragpunks, if it comes out as the game I think it wants to be, I think it'll be one that would be awesome to watch other people play very well.
Yep, I totally agree. It could be a little Twitch hit in the making. Certainly, it's got a more interesting USP on the surface than some other games might do. Earlier on, we talked about a game starring a deer that is probably going to make you cry. And if that's not your speed and you wanted something slightly smaller, then may I recommend a game starring a mouse that will probably make you cry. It's called Winter Burrow, and it looked to be sort of like a survival game with an interesting, if not kind of totally eye-catching art style. Next, though, we got something that caught. I think even if we didn't know who was making it or publishing it, would have been what I think. I don't want to speak for you, but certainly one of my favorite games of the whole showcase, and that was Mixtape, which is the new Annapurna game that's being developed by Beethoven and Dinosaur of the Artful Escape fame, that explores memories through music set in the early 90s. It has what looks to be a banging and licensed soundtrack that is going to drive Twitch streamers up the wall as they battle copyright claims. But for us normal folk, I mean, if they nail even a fraction of the kind of that beautiful blend of kind of amazing art style and great music that Artful Escape did, then they're onto a winner here, right?
Yeah, I would almost say it looks like a cross between like Life is Strange and Artful Escape, and then with the way it's
Yeah.
like teen angsty, but the visual style was arresting as well, and then with the music, everything comes together. Yeah, it looks like it could be a really interesting game.
Yeah, sure. That's another one where like when they said Game Pass, which again that was how I think both you and I played the Artful Escape at first as well. Was
I believe
that
so. Yeah.
yeah, just an absolute winner, much like Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 will be for anyone who said, I like flying planes, but I need more of a reason to do so. Because when that launches on November 19th, you will have a range of aviation careers to inspire your travels. Have you ever wanted to fly a plane for a celebrity to get them from one place to another? Well, now you can. Have you ever wanted to do crop dusting? And I'm not just talking about farts. There you
I want to
go.
be a crop duster.
Jonesy, you can be a crop duster. And if you don't, I hope you stream that because your streams of the original Microsoft Flight, when I say original, I mean the most recent Microsoft Flight Simulator, were a great laugh. Seeing you do the entirety of, I think it was like a London to Edinburgh flight flawlessly,
Yeah.
and then kill everyone on the landing with an actual pilot sat next to you was a joy to behold.
Well, there you go.
Elder Scrolls Online is still going. You can play all of the previous DLC for free for a limited time ahead of the launch of the next DLC, The Gold Road, on June 18th. We then, speaking of Life is Strange, got an actual new Life is Strange game, Life is Strange Double Exposure. And what I didn't realize at the time, and I've learned after the fact, is that Double Exposure actually stars the Life is Strange 1's protagonist, Max Caulfield. Caulfield. They actually threw a title card up there at one point saying like the next Max Caulfield adventure, and for some reason it just didn't register what I was looking at.
It didn't register with me, which I'm playing Life is Strange 1 at the moment, and it didn't register with
weird.
me either. Like, it's been like a month since I last tipped my toe. But no, I'm playing it at the moment, and it didn't. And the name did click with me, but it didn't click that it was that character. So yeah,
Didn't look much like it, did it? Like,
well, I guess the
even a
age,
grown-up
is,
version.
yeah, a lot more grown up. Yeah.
Yeah, Double Exposure, presumably there, like a little pun about the fact that Max likes photography, and two, it's her second time starring in a Life is Strange adventure. This one, a murder mystery where it looks like Max kind of has to solve and prevent the murder of her friend in two different timelines. We'll find out more in October. October, around the time that we might also be learning a little bit more and playing even more of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. We don't know for sure because for some reason this was another game with a 2024 release date that they have yet to confirm exactly when it's going to come. But this was a fun little trailer that showed an extended kind of cutscene and then a little montage of some of the expected whippy, punchy, shooty action that followed.
It looks so good. Like I think this could be something really special. I don't want to get too excited because the last two Indiana Jones films have been not great. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think this actually could be the future for Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford, and keeping that alive into the future, as Harrison is far too old to play the character now, I would say, and the writers of the films are apparently losing their marbles. So hopefully, Machine Games can make it work.
Leave it to Machine Games and Troy Baker to do what somehow Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford and whoever directed the most recent one apparently can't do. Definitely one that I'm hugely looking forward to later this year. Beyond this year, though, we go back to 2025. We got another look at Mecha Break, which is going to have a beta this August for anyone interested in that. Also in 2025, Wu Chang, Fallen Feathers, a game about a pirate warrior with cursed blood that, again, I kind of looked at and said, this looks like another Soulsborne game. I think I've had my fill of those for the time. Not shoot any shots, but like, wasn't really my vibe. A little bit more my vibe. We saw more of Avowed, Obsidian's upcoming RPG, that got a new story trailer. I want to play this game, but I would say that in spite of everything they keep showing me about it. I want to play it because it's a new Obsidian RPG. I don't want to play it because of anything that any of the trailers have done.
It just is quite. Avowed for me is going in a weird direction, and it looks weird. It looks like they can't decide what they want to do to me, and I don't know if that's accurate. I mean, maybe it'll be fine when it actually releases, but it just looks a bit confused. I'll say that.
Art direction looks a little bit all over the place to me. Like I just can't quite sink my teeth into what they're going for. But the bummer is just I have a horrible feeling that it'll have some of the best writing and quests in an RPG this year, because that's just what that team do. So we'll see. We will again find out later this year, but no specific date in mind for that. Atomfall is Rebellion's new bonkers-looking sort of first-person game coming out in 2025. Hard to describe this one. Kind of like a weird sort of slightly British post-apocalyptic FPS with a lot of sort of bizarro elements going on there. Go and check out the trailer because I can't do it justice. We then also got the second sort of like, I guess, tease for a game that Ubisoft would be blowing up in a much bigger way later on, with Assassin's Creed Shadows getting a trailer that kind of gave us our first snippets on gameplay. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we go over the Ubisoft Forward. And then we got a new trailer for Stalker 2, which continues to look very solid and very shiny and very attractive, but I'm still slightly worried that it's just going to scare me in ways that I haven't been able to kind of like wrap my head around yet.
This trailer was tricksy. We talked about it on the live stream. Like, it looks really good. It looks very cool. It looks like you're gonna have a lot of fun. It looks like it's a very good looking game. It looks like everything's gonna work beautifully. And then they just had this little like elements of terror, whereby you've got like motion sensors, or you've got things that are telling you, you know, this is not a safe environment, and the world in general is telling you that as well. And you know, Stalker, so it's probably going to be terrifying. But they're trying to lure me in, Jamie. They're trying to lure me in, and then they're going to slap me with something terrifying, and I'm not going to want to play anymore.
Yes, and then you'll quit the game in that instant, and you'll uninstall it as well, and you'll never look back. Exactly. Because who wants to run into a creepy Chernobyl monster in a dark like tunnel while you're scavenging for something? Not me. But if it's something that you want to do, you can do so surprisingly soon, the 5th of September of this very year, after a long and slightly complicated development process owing to the order of war here or there. Stalker 2 will finally see the light of day. And before they got to their kind of one last thing, their closing game, they did also reveal a couple of new consoles. There's a white all-digital Series X. There is a Galaxy-inspired Series X that has a bigger, I think, 2 terabytes of internal storage, and another model of the Series S as well. So anyone who is waiting for some new color schemes to get them excited in the Xbox brand, one, I'm not really sure why that was what you needed to push you over the edge, but two, there you go, you got your wish. And then finally, Jonesy, they closed with the much anticipated return of Gears of War, albeit in a guise that not many people saw coming. This was Gears of War E-Day, which it turns out is a prequel set 14 years before the original game, and starring Marcus Phoenix, of course, but fan favorite and soon to be dead Dom is back by his side, which kind of a fascinating one. On the one hand, like Gears 5 was a very solid game that very much set up like the final game in that second trilogy. There are some kind of cliffhangers and some big story moments that some people are going to be very upset to have to wait even longer to get resolutions for. But on the other hand, a prequel that puts Marcus and Dom sort of like back in their headlining slots, I think is going to be right up a lot of people's alleys. It's what a lot of people, I think, want from Gears of War, more so than some of the directions that 4 and 5 took. And it's also just a great way to onboard more people who are potentially new to Gears of War, right? As a prequel.
Yeah, I think I was really hyped for this. I'm someone who didn't get to play Gears when I was younger because it was Xbox, didn't have an Xbox. But I've always enjoyed the series, and especially the later games. Like I think they just feel different. Like Gears of War games feel fantastic and they look great, and there's a lot to be excited about. But yeah, a prequel sounds exactly what I need, exactly what I want from Gears right about now. Whenever it drops, is E-Day right up my
Yeah.
street.
Hopefully, we don't have to wait too long for that. The trailer is interesting. Jeff Keighley actually got himself in a bit of hot water. Did you see this?
No.
Because he reposted the trailer, and essentially, so that trailer was outsourced and made by Blur, who are like that really famous production house that like make loads of CG stuff. They do that. What's it called? The Netflix thing that David Fincher's involved with. It's like Love, Death, and Robots and stuff like that.
Right.
And loads of like famous CG trailers and stuff like that from going back years and years and years. And Jeff Keighley posted it, was like, oh yeah, this is Gears returning with a new CG trailer from Blur Studio, and loads of devs who work in some cases directly on the projects, in some cases from other parts of the Xbox family, were like, this is horribly misinformed and misleading. Like when you say CG, like you make people think it's pre-rendered. So apparently this trailer was all running in real time on Unreal Engine 5, using assets that that were given to Blur based on like the in-game assets. And because the game itself will of course be running on Unreal Engine 5 as well, this is essentially a visualization of exactly what the game will be trying to do.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But so we've gotten to the point now where games and CG are being made in the same engine, right?
Yeah.
So you can say, yes, that was Blur working on Unreal Engine 5, but also we're making our game in Unreal Engine 5. Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy that we're at that point where games can look that good, in engine, which is awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. At this point, Jonesy, I'm reminded of the question that we got at the top of the show about cross-platform. I pulled a quote here from Phil Spencer, who was on an IGN show later on, and said, you're going to see more of our games on more platforms. Obviously, some of the only things we know for sure coming out of this showcase and coming to, say, PlayStation 5, for example, are Black Ops 6, which is a no-brainer, but we also got confirmation, as expected, that Doom: The Dark Ages will be a cross-platform release. When you look at, I'm not even sure where to start, but let's say future games like State of Decay 3 and Fable and maybe even Indiana Jones and Gears of War, and then when you look at maybe some slightly older games that are still being updated, like Starfield, do you look at these titles now and think it's a matter of time, or that before they come to the PlayStation 5, or do you think that kind of current policy of the right games at the right time will continue to be how Xbox operate?
I think it's going to be the right games at the right time. I don't think we'll see all of these coming to PlayStation. However, I would, for example, just pick Microsoft Flight Simulator. That's not going to come to PlayStation. No. I think you've got games like that are still being supported, that are carrying on, like Sea of Thieves, Starfield. Did Starfield? Something like Starfield. I think we had a whole conversation about that before, because we said would that come to PlayStation? And we were talking about it at the time. I could see that going to PlayStation. At some point in the future. But then when it comes to things like Mixtape, Indiana Jones, and Stalker 2, I'm like, yeah, I could easily see those coming over. Gears of War, I'm like, no, I don't think that will. I don't know. I think it'll be a game by game, as you said. I think it'll be a game by game, right platform, right time. Because inevitably, if Xbox continue on the path they're on, I think there will be day and date games released across all platforms at all times. But I don't think we're there yet.
Right. Yes, I agree. I don't think we're there yet, and that means that a kind of like the right game, right time strategy will be maintained. I just feel like I'm struggling to know which are the right games and what is the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I look at something like South of Midnight, and I'm like, nah, that probably doesn't come to PlayStation because like it doesn't need to, and it's like a small thing. And then I think back to the initial 4 games they made cross-platform in that kind of sort of initial thingy that they laid out however many months ago, and I'm like, well, actually, South of Midnight might end up ticking the same boxes that Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment did, that saw them come to PS5. Like maybe South of Midnight, in being a smaller game, is actually like the quintessential example of a game that would go cross-platform to kind of maximize the amount of revenue it would generate. I just don't know. Then you get into like Gears and like I agree, like Gears of War E-Day. I don't anticipate that coming to PlayStation 5 anytime soon. But do they look at Gears of War as a franchise as something that they want to get their tendrils into other places? And like, do we get the long rumored like Gears of War collection or whatever it ends up being
Right.
on PlayStation platforms that sells 5 million copies, and then all of a sudden Gears of War E-Day does come to PlayStation 5 later, and they continue to try and do that thing where like he got some stick for this, but Herman Hulst, the one of PlayStation's co-CEOs now, was speaking to I think like investors and in kind of like a financial kind of update last month, or maybe earlier this month. And he talked about their strategy for bringing games to PC. And he said one of the things they hoped to do with PC was like release games on there like Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War that then entices people or makes people interested in their sequels that they then have to buy a PlayStation 5 to play.
Right.
And a lot of people were like, you don't understand PC players, they would never do that.
Yeah,
But I wonder,
absolutely.
I wonder if there's an element of that with the Xbox could lean into with PlayStation, where maybe there is more of a crossover thing where it's like, do you whet PlayStation players' appetites for the long history of Gears games or Halo games, and then say, here's the big new expensive one, and you have to buy a console to play it? I don't know.
Maybe I think it seems that Xbox have been much more realistic about where they're positioned in the hardware hardware wars, and that they seem to be suggesting as they're going forward they're just going to be making more games across more platforms, which is why I see the direction as travel as being making them, like as they've said, making them more accessible, and not necessarily doing. PlayStation definitely seem more cutthroat when it comes to like trying to get people to buy more PlayStations, whereas it seems like Xbox are moving away from that.
Right.
Although, but maybe not. You know, times change, CEOs change, MDs change, director of operations change, and they might change their outlet.
You're absolutely right. Things like that can change at the drop of a hat, and knowing the video games industry, they probably will.
Can I quickly, before we move on, give a shout out to Pastors Guild for the $5 super chat. Who
Hey,
just stopped by to say I made it, and FYI, that monthly games coming segment came from me, and I will never let you forget it. We would never forget it.
how could we forget that that was your idea, Pastors Guild? Thank you very much for the super chat, and glad you were able to stop by. And with that, Jonesy, we come to the last sort of showcase of sorts that we're going to wrap up in its entirety, at least. And I'll be honest, with the exception of like I'm going to say 3 bullet points, I'm going to do the Cliff Notes version of this, and it's not me trying to throw any shade at Ubisoft or their lineup and the kind of the games that they're talking about at the moment. But I'm just going to be upfront and say that Ubisoft didn't have an awful lot to show. Almost everything they did show was something we knew, and so I'm just going to quickly say that we got, as expected, a look at upcoming seasonal content for X-Defiant, upcoming seasonal content for Skull and Bones, a new story DLC pack for Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, Year 2 of the Crew Motorfest, a new Anno game, Anno 117 Pax Romana, which will deliver a Roman gaming experience, unlike anything you have ever played. And then finally, with all those other updates out the way, we got to the middle child of kind of the 3 interesting sort of talking points, all things Ubisoft. Prince of Persia. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is going to get a free update that adds more content. There is also going to be a brand new biome and enemies and weapons coming to the Rogue Prince of Persia in its first update. But the thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, Jonesy, was the absolutely batshit insane decision to almost re-reveal the remake of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time with a 2026 release date attached to it. What was going through your mind when you saw that visual?
It was weird because, so for people that don't know, they've had a real problem with the remake of Sands of Time. Originally, it was given, I think it was to Ubisoft Mumbai, along with another studio that basically completely screwed the pooch and gave us that horrible looking remake trailer for Sands of
Yeah.
Time last
Which
year.
was but that was 4 years ago we first saw that.
Was it that was the trailer 4 years ago? Was it? Yeah, was it 4 years
I
ago?
I,
Oh
I
my
have
goodness!
for
Is
anyone
it
that
that
doesn't
long
know,
ago?
I don't use Twitter, right? You know that, you'll vouch for that. I don't use Twitter. My last tweet was a joke at the expense of what that. My last tweet was, Ubisoft was so committed to Prince of Persia's time-bending roots that they accidentally made a game that looked like it should have come out 14 years ago. Um, and
Oh,
that tweet is
I can't believe that was 4 years ago. My
that tweet is
brain
dated
is
11th of September 2020.
Jesus. So yeah, they made an absolutely horrible looking room. That doesn't even make sense now because that was 4 years ago, and so they're 4 years on from that, and they're touting a game which is going to come out in 2026. It's a remake from a game. It's bizarre. It's truly bizarre. It's baffling. I think what's probably happened is they saw what happened with that potential remake. They saw the backlash. They saw how livid fans were, and they said, "Do you know what? We are going to make the absolute crap out of this remake until it is something beautiful." And unless if that is not the reason, and it doesn't come out as being one of the best goddamn things Ubisoft have ever made, I'll be I think I'll be completely baffled and blown away. Because why it takes that long to remake an old game, yeah, doesn't make any sense to me.
It makes absolutely no sense. Do you know what was even more distressing? And I really hope this didn't cross your mind either, otherwise you might have had an actual breakdown. When they were doing the Prince of Persia section, they brought this lady out to be sort of like the voice of Prince of Persia, and they had behind her like a running animation from the original game from the 80s or whatever it was. And she was talking about like it's the Prince of Persia 35th anniversary and all this stuff is happening, and there's new content coming to the Lost Crown, and there's new content
She
coming to the
announced three
Road
things.
Prince of
She said
Persia.
three things, didn't she? She was like, "We're going to announce
Yeah,
three things." Yeah.
and I was so certain that there's no way that they would touch the Sands of Time remake, because we knew that behind the scenes it had basically been completely rebooted. That I was like, oh my god, are they about to like plug the gap with? And I feel bad for even saying these words, with a remastered collection of like the PS2 trilogy or something like that. Are they going to like do a make good where they really quickly package together Sands of Time, Warrior Within, Two Thrones, like loosely remastered, in like to and just chuck it out or something like that?
Oh, I have I
Because there was
can
a point where they were doing all the art and the anniversary stuff, and I was like, they're going to do something.
I was absolutely anticipating it to be Sands of Time, the third thing. Like when she said it, I was like, "Oh, it's Sands of Time." I was thinking they were going to say coming the end of this year or coming early
Okay.
25. Here is the new look, or this is a look at the new Sands of Time trailer. Now
Yeah.
that we've made good on it, I was not anticipating a title with barely anything else and a 2026. Like that just seems, yeah, that seems crazy. Like I was very surprised.
Especially like it. This is a company that, for example, like mere weeks before this showcase, cancelled the Division Heartland, which was a
Right.
free-to-play Division title that had been in some form of development for about the same amount of time as this remake. So the fact that they're still committed to this and have rebooted it, and it is just now entering into full production again, they must really think they've got something here. Otherwise, like, why wouldn't you just give up? Why wouldn't you just cancel it like you cancel all those other things?
That's such a good point. And you got to think like it's the 35th anniversary this year. So it's going to be 37 years since Prince of Persia when the remake of Sands of Time comes out. Like maybe it's time to move on. Like it's been so long now.
Yeah, and you released two new good Prince of Persia games this year. Focus on them.
Yeah, yeah. I just focus on it. It just doesn't really make sense. I'm kind of with you. I was really looking forward to a Sands of Time remake, but I'm getting to the point where it just seems silly at this point. It's been too long. It's been too messed up, and do you know, or make a completely new Prince of Persia game. If you really were going to do that,
Yeah.
you've now spent years trying to remake. Like it was fine. I would say it was the least, probably the second best of that trilogy. But yeah, I don't know. It was surprising to say the least.
Surprising, disappointing, lots of ings. But really, with all that aside, and all the kind of seasonal and additional content coming to all of Ubisoft's other games, this Forward was largely about the two major titles releasing later this year that bookended the showcase, and both of them got extended gameplay looks. We start where they started, Jonesy, with Star Wars Outlaws, which, I mean, I guess the first question I kind of want to ask you is, are you now more convinced that this is a real open world game, or do you still have your reservations?
Do you know what? I'm of two minds.
Okay.
Massively more convinced that. Oh, I keep elbowing my guitar. I'm massively more convinced that it's a proper open world game. But on one side, you had this proper, like, you're in Mos Eisley, you're walking around, you're exploring stuff, you're picking up contracts, you're a bounty hunter, and it was like, oh my goodness, this could actually be an astonishing game, which comes out later this year. And this is really going to be a truly beautiful Star Wars game, which is going to blow everyone away and be absolutely fantastic. They then later on in the gameplay showed a shot where your character was looking through binoculars and tagging people, and was like, oh, you can get in here and you can choose how you're going to get in and take out this person and stop them from calling for backup. I'm like, oh, it's a Far Cry game. It's an open world Far Cry game. Like, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
And which makes but I think everyone's probably hoping that this isn't that. Like, this shouldn't be that. This shouldn't be a there's these individual little pockets of people and you can choose to take them out. Or I've put the explosive over there. I shoot this person with a blaster and then I click my little thing and blow that up over there, and I cut the bell so they can't ring for back. Like, if they just do that, it will just feel like a reskin of another Ubisoft game, and that's not what I'm hoping for. I'm really hoping for like a very, very cool open world Star Wars game. I will even take the terrible looking space combat that they've got in this game with the spaceship and the flying. I'll give them that. That's a freebie. Make it shit. That's fine. As long as the on world stuff and like the upgrading of your speeder and things like that is fun, and this game it works and is cool, and because they've even got this system whereby you can get in favor with different factions. You can get in good with the Hutts. You can get in good with the what are those little people called? The little
Midgets.
Jawas.
Dwarves?
You'd like getting on with the Jawas. Like that idea with Star Wars characters and factions sounds so cool. I really want to do that. I had a real urge to be like Jabba the Hutt's bitch. I don't know why. To be like, Jabba, I've taken out all your enemies and now I would be your favorite bounty hunter. And I can be what's his name? The bounty hunter that everyone knows from Star Wars.
Jango Fett.
Yeah, that one. Or Boba Fett, whatever. Boba Fett. I can be Boba Fett standing on the little floating thing when Luke is there, and I can be like Bubba's. I can be the one standing there, just in on it, like one of the bad guys. That sounds quite cool to me. I want to do that. But yeah, when they just showed that Far Cry-esque stuff, and I'm just like, oh, it's just going to be the same as every other Ubisoft open world game. But anyway, I'm being positive these days, so no, it looks much better. It looks like a much better open world game. I'm really excited about it, and it's not even that far away.
It's true. It's right around the corner. And I will say, you want to talk about another Ubisoft massive joint based on a large franchise. It didn't look like it had been as Ubisoft-ified as the Avatar game, Frontiers of Pandora, felt to play. That was at times almost indistinguishable from some of the fundamentals of the Far Cry franchise. It felt like it flipped back and forth. I think you kind of nailed it, which is that when you're in some of the slightly more densely populated urban environments and walking through, and everything's kind of like dark and grungy and like I don't know, that felt like the kind of Star Wars game I wanted to play. A Star Wars game that isn't interested in like the Force and lightsabers and the hero's journey. It's just like, no, like this is like life in a city within the world of Star Wars. And it hasn't really been explored in the game before. I liked that. As soon as she got in her speeder and started going out to that outpost, I was like, this is doing less and less for me. But I want to wait and see. It was interesting to hear some people obviously played it at SGF. A lot of people coming away from it saying big Uncharted energy coming from it, which wasn't something that was necessarily emanating a huge amount from that trailer.
No.
Another thing I wanted to, sorry.
No, I was going to say that to me, that's a lot more hope. Well, that gives me a lot more hope than I was kind of thinking. I'm up for like something feeling a bit more Uncharted. I was going to ask you though how you felt about the. It seems like the loop is going to be. You've got this massive job that's going to be a huge payday. It's going to really do you some good. So you need to up your skills, and you up your skills by finding experts who can teach you things like how to use blasters better, how to use lockpicking better, how to do XYZ better. What were your thoughts on that kind of loop? Because that sort of made me think. I kind of thought that maybe that loop will run dry pretty quick if you're having to, or if it get very samey.
It could. It could, and I think that's kind of like one of the interesting things about the way that they presented. It's almost Starfield like way of presenting that open world, which is that you've got all these planets and all these landing points in the planets. And I thought they had a fairly like nice and sophisticated way of showing how you transition from one to the other. The idea of like you fly towards the planet's atmosphere and they hide the load behind the clouds, and then you just land. And
I actually think
if Starfield had done more things like that, I think that people would have complained a lot less about the loading screens. And so that was interesting. But it creates a weird thing where like usually when you're talking about an open world game, you're talking about one unbroken large area, and your impetus for exploration and finding things to do, and whether and the kind of the upgrades and the things that you pick up along the way is sort of the next thing you see. Like sometimes either literally or sometimes via a map. When this almost feels like by creating these more segmented parts of the open world, the impetus comes the other way around. Like you need to find the thing you need to be told about the thing you want to do, and then you go out and do it.
Right.
And that part of the loop, it doesn't come as naturally to me. It feels like it's based less on sort of exploration and freedom, and it's slightly more kind of like structured, I guess. And so the part of the open world experience that I'm looking forward to finding out about, to know if that like I actually am engaged by that loop, is like, okay, you take that bounty, or you have to agree to do this mission. You go out, you land on that planet, you do it, you do that Far Cry sort of base wipeout thing, you complete the mission, and you're then just on that planet. If I were to then like go and jump on my speeder and just like cruise around for 10 minutes in a certain direction, would I find things to do? Right. Would I be entered, or do I have to like go to another hub or a depot and like find the next thing to do and then go and pursue that? That's the part of the loop that I couldn't quite gauge, and I need to see sort of for myself to know if I'll be super excited by it.
There was an open world game that popped into my head. I don't know why, as I was watching it, and it's not a good one.
Oh no!
But this isn't say like I don't know why it popped into my head, but I just started thinking about Rage 2 and Steph Murphy and talking about like how there's more to do on his journey home or something than there is in Rage 2. And I was kind of thinking, I think there was a section where you're get to the top of a mountain on a speeder, and I was thinking, oh, is that you're just going to drive up to the top of a mountain and there's going to be nothing about, and it's going to be pretty landscapes, and it's going to be cool that you're in Star Wars, but as you've just alluded to is there nothing to do? Because if that's the case, and they're relying on it's something else that was interesting. I don't know if this was stylistically chosen or whether this is how it works. I was wondering if like from point A on a map to point B, there is actually a cinematic of you on your speeder which connects the two together, rather than a literal traversal that you're doing. Because a couple of times it did go from you're in a certain place, you get on your speeder, you go off, and then it had a cinematic shot of the speeder zooming past, and then you were in another area. And I kind of felt like actually maybe that is a good way to go, because otherwise what you risk having is the world's feeling very small.
Maybe
it's just there's a lot of unanswered questions.
But then they keep calling it the first open world Star Wars game.
That would be hub world.
Show us the evidence. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Show us the evidence of that.
Show us the evidence.
Well, and we will to a certain extent we will play the evidence sooner than we think. I also pulled out a thing here where Greg Miller of Kind of Funny Games tweeted, played 3 Star Wars Outlaws missions at Summer Game Fest. It's my game of the show.
Wow, okay.
Because that I will also say, just to needlessly add hype, everyone who played any amount of Astrobot has said unequivocally amazing things about it. one person, Jeff Grubb, in fact, who gets name dropped in this podcast every now and then, has said that he's only played 20 minutes of Astrobot and he thinks it's his game of the year. So
that's nice to hear.
Nice to hear some positive stuff coming about that. The other thing that we saw a good chunk of for the very first time was Assassin's Creed Shadows, that showed off everything from that game's dynamic kind of weather system and seasonal system to how the gameplay will differentiate between that game's two protagonists, whether it's the big beefy combat of Yasuke or the more stealthy Ronin action of Naoe, how the two kind of complement each other and how certain missions fork in different directions and allow you to choose who you'd like to experience that mission as. I, again, wasn't sure exactly how I felt about this showcase. Like a lot of the recent Assassin's Creed games, I felt like the line between something that was very pretty and something that was janky was constantly paper thin. Like it would be like a really nice environment and then slightly awkward combat, or like a really nice lighting and then a slightly janky animation. I think fundamentally it will be fine and I'll enjoy it because it's an Assassin's Creed game and I haven't really not enjoyed one of those for some time now. But it didn't blow me away. How did you feel?
I'm kind of in the same place as you are. Like, I think it looked very capable. When it actually got to the being Yasuke and then like trying to fight your way through a few enemies with his big, I don't know what that weapon is called, the big spiky club.
Oh, big weapon. Sorry, yeah, okay.
That I then was and you were sort of like beating up the people and knocking their stamina bars down and taking their health down. You know, that to me just didn't look that impressive in some respects. But I guess that's always been a secondary consideration for Assassin's Creed games up to a certain point. Like the main thing was always like you're a stealthy character, but obviously recently in the last few games that has not necessarily been the case. But yeah, I'm with you. It looked very good in some respects. It looked kind of janky in others. When you then got to when you got to watch Naoe do some of what she was doing, that looked much better, I would say, because she was sort of being stealthing around on top of roofs and sort of like distracting people and throwing knives at lanterns.
Yeah, grappling hook and stuff, and yeah.
The grappling hook I didn't really. I don't know. That kind of made me cringe a little because it was a bit too arcadey. For what I thought they were going for. It just seemed a little bit less realistic from what they were going through with like Naoe and with Yatsuke. But no, I think it's that game has got the potential to be fantastic. And being able to switch up between the two characters for a play style and have the option of how do you want to take this on, this way or this way. I think all of that is going the right way. Yeah, I don't know. I think you nailed it. It's paper thin between wow, this looks really good, and wow, I thought this would look better.
Yeah,
which is kind of odd.
And no, I thought Valhalla had some of that at times as well.
That's true. That's very true.
We will find out for ourselves when that game releases in November. I forget the exact date, but I tell you
soon?
What.
Well, okay.
Yeah, that is this year. That I guess, and that was, I suppose, with hindsight, why Ubisoft went so hard on those two games, because they are kind of their big bets at the moment. Star Wars Outlaws, 30th of August, Assassin's Creed Shadows, 12th of November.
I have to say though, I think you and Chris, because we were WhatsApping after the Ubisoft Forward, I think you were a little unfair to Ubisoft.
I stand by what I said, but have at it.
Only purely because I think when you put Ubisoft show after Xbox, after Game Fest, I think it's easy to say, oh, there wasn't as much going on. There's not much going on. But this is a single publisher who like still very big but are a lot smaller, and for them to have Star Wars Outlaws, which I think looks cracking, Assassin's Creed, which has got a lot of potential, a lot of other games that they are still supporting, and then more coming to Prince of Persia, even if they did do that horrendous Sands of Time 2026 kind of crappy reveal. I don't know. I thought it was fine. I think it was I think they They could have, if they'd wanted to, they could have come with some other stuff. Hey, this is coming out in 2025. This is coming out in 2026. Or we're making this at the moment, and they could have put a few more things in there maybe. Or this is coming in the future. I'm kind of glad they didn't. The fact they just focused on this year and supporting other games, I think was fine. I would put it maybe somewhere between Game Fest and Xbox. Like as how
I think that's crazy to me. I think that's crazy.
Not that it was better than Game Fest. Like I'm not suggesting it was better than Game Fest in the sense of like Game Fest had loads more cool stuff and loads more games. But if I had to say what was available to Game Fest and what was available to Xbox and what was available to Ubisoft, I feel like it was a decent show. It was a half decent. Okay, I'll say a half decent showing from them.
But like again, like you talk about like what's available to you, you make a choice based on what's available to you. If you opened up your fridge and had 3 cheese slices, some moldy ham, and like half a carrot, and you invited 10 friends over to dinner, like you knew what you had and you made the choice.
I think Star Wars Outlaws
Ubisoft made the choice to come to LA to rent out a venue to put orchestras on stage, and they announced one video game. And it was Anno 117.
I maybe I'm giving them a lot of leeway for the fact that I'm fine with them just giving updates on games that we already know about and not necessarily announcing new things.
Yeah, but do you know what there was a Ubisoft Forward last year? Do you know what they did in it? Showed off a gameplay sequence from Star Wars Outlaws. Like, it's just bemusing to me. And I know that sometimes companies want to keep up appearances and like maybe they feel like they need to have a presence at stuff like something like this, but like if you wanted to show us 15 minutes each of Star Wars Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Shadows, you could do that in so many other ways than a sort of this kind of than some of the pomp and circumstance around this particular show. I also wanted to just echo what you said, that the whole Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake has been so badly botched that when you have the gall to re-announce a reboot of a remake, that's a lot of re's, with a title card and a 2026 trailer, and you're not willing to talk about anything else that is going on beyond this year, when we know that there's a Far Cry in development and we know you're remaking Splinter Cell. I just think like I don't know. I thought it was a bad look.
I will give you. I 100% will agree with you that a lot of the pomp should have been taken out. Like the string orchestra. I think it could have been shorter. I think if they have just gone Star Wars out. Do you know what? As you did, I think if they'd have just gone Star Wars Outlaws, Prince of Persia, and then done and then gone Assassin's Creed Shadows, and then almost have had like a post-show updates to Avatar, to Skull and Bones, and to X to Fire.
I mean,
I think that would have made more sense.
It could have made more sense. You know what? What summarizes all of this for me, and I didn't even include it in the document because I felt so sorry for them.
Right.
Yves Guillemot, the CEO of Ubisoft, came out on person in stage. He flew. He used air miles. He polluted the world, the environment, to fly from France to Los Angeles, to come out on stage for 10 seconds, to thank us all for watching a show that was so bare bones, so empty, that they devoted time to telling us that Year 8 Season 2 of For Honor was a thing.
I genuinely, I was like, is For Honor still going? I was genuinely surprised.
Year 8 Season 2 of For Honor was on stage at the third biggest showcase of the quote unquote summer of games.
So maybe that's why, because I don't think that I kind of think that there's no way this was the third biggest showcase, but it was, because it was the third biggest showcase. But I think the problem is that the way that it's now packaged is we think of this as being like E3 week, and so you take all the biggest ones. Whereas actually, I would have said Ubisoft, Devolver Digital, Annapurna Interactive. Did Annapurna do one? I can't remember.
No, Annapurna didn't do one. They just showed up other things. There was Day of the Devs.
Right. I think it was kind of so small this year that Ubisoft was elevated to be like this bigger thing, whereas I don't think it should have been. I think it was because I was fine with them giving me more info on Star Wars and Assassin's Creed. That like I was up for seeing more of those games, and the other stuff I'm like, okay, fine, squidge it into the show if you need to, but I think the problem is they elevated it to this thing that they shouldn't have done. Maybe that's what they did wrong.
And to be fair, sometimes it takes two to tango, and sometimes it's not even that they elevated their show; it's that we elevate their shows with our hopes and expectations. And I've scolded a lot of people before for getting themselves too excited for things that showcases were never going to deliver. I didn't think it was unreasonable to expect that Ubisoft were going to time a forward in this kind of bracket and have more to show the world for the first time than Anno 117. I stand by the fact that that's not unreasonable.
Oh no, I don't think it's unreasonable. I'll give you that. The fact if they'd have just included like the next Far Cry game, I think it would have done a lot of work for them.
Yeah, I think it would have helped. It would have made me feel like I didn't waste as much time as I kind of feel like I wasted.
Do you think you wasted it? Okay.
Well, maybe that's a strong word. I don't know. But you're right. I think sometimes when it comes to weeks like these, it's actually helpful to take the more holistic approach and look at it as like one sort of like never-ending stream of things. And what I also found this year was the more time I spent looking at Day of the Devs or the Wholesome Direct or the Future Game Show, I haven't even caught up on some of the stuff. I haven't caught up on the PC Gamer Showcase or anything like that yet. But the more time I spent watching some of those other streams, the smaller streams, and just seeing like what other little things are kind of out there, the more happy I was about the fact that this week kind of exists and serves the purpose it does. And I know it's not like for like replacement for E3, and that bums some people out. I get that, but I am happy about what Summer Game Fest is, and I hope it continues to be this. I don't know if that, if you feel the same way about it. If we acknowledge that like E3 as we knew it will never exist again.
I agree with you. For my liking, I think it should be longer. I think it should be a few weeks, and I'd like to see more people get involved and have it more protracted. It doesn't have to all happen like in a weekend.
I think how like rapid fire everything is a part of what helps it feel that little bit more like E3. It's like that thing of like, oh, what's happening today? There's so many streams I can watch.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I suppose what I really want is just more people to be involved with it, so that it is the same amount of intensity but over a longer period, so that it feels like proper E3. Because I swear that E3 used to feel like it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like because you'd have the build up, you'd have a few shows, then you'd have like
3 days.
No, but E3 is, but then you would the shows you have before, the shows you have after, like there was like this swell. Maybe not. It's used to how it felt to me a couple of times.
The press conference. I mean, they used to have multiple press conferences in one day. Like they would sometimes have publishers would go 2 or 3 a day. Apart from Nintendo, and then E3 lasted 3 days.
Do you know what? I did watch Devolver Digital's one, and I liked that. I thought that was good. I love the energy they bring. It's a bit weird, a bit wacky, and pretty cool. Yeah. Before we finish up, I would say, did you see that Ubisoft were also at Apple's event, and they've announced that Shadows will be coming to Mac OS and iPad OS on release day?
I did not see that, and I do not particularly care.
I did, but that to me is kind of madness. I was just thinking,
it is impressive if it works and looks good and runs sufficiently well.
Exactly what I was thinking. I was like, what? So you can get an iPad, plug a controller into it maybe, and then play Assassin's Creed Shadows absolutely fine. Like, what? That just blew my mind.
It's not going to be the way you want to play it.
If it worked well.
But what if it costs the same amount? What if the retail price is the same as the PS5 version?
But for me, I mean, I'm not going to do it. But if there's someone out there who doesn't have a console but they have an iPad and they can get a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows and it looks and plays exactly the same as it would on PlayStation 5, and they just needed to get a controller, that kind of is a bit baffling to me.
I don't know that. I don't know how many people there are out there that own an iPad that costs double the price of a console and want to pay full price for AAA releases and are still just not going to buy a console.
Maybe, but if you already had one for the purpose of like, I don't know, I've got an iPad because of X, and then you're like, you can play a.
If that's the case, then yes, that could be cool.
It just seems surprising.
I haven't kept up on that because I know that like. In the original run, like Assassin's Creed, last year's one, shit, Mirage was
Yeah,
announced for
Mirage. Yeah,
like
I think I played that
iPads,
as well.
Resident Evil Village, Death Stranding, but I never checked in on how any of them actually performed. I
No,
remember
me
just
either.
going like, "Oh, that's neat."
I was exactly the same. But oh, that's cool.
But
I'm
yeah,
never going to play it, but it's good to know it's a
yeah, and do
possibility.
you know what? I would love to have one of those fancy pants iPads. They look really neat. And
They
same
do
with the
look really
fancy
cool.
pants, like Pro pencils or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
All the expensive Apple stuff that we get to see in glossy trailers and never afford.
Oh, the amount they spent so long talking about the Apple Vision Pro on their little
Uh,
thing, and I was just like, how many? And they were talking about how many apps specifically for Apple Vision Pro, and I was thinking, how many people are you talking to right now? It's got to be
well, a
not
whole lot
that
more.
many.
I think it's shipping to more countries in, is it July? It comes to the UK
I
for the first
believe
time.
so. Yeah, end of July, I think.
I did see that reveal, and I was like, how many episodes of the podcast does it take before Jonesy turns his camera on and he's wearing one?
Do you know what? I
I've
was trying to
remortgaged the house.
I was trying to angle for us to need one at work for something. So I was telling my manager like, "Oh, we could probably use a Apple Vision Pro for doing." And he was like, "Yeah, actually, maybe we could." I'm like, "Oh my god. I just want to compare it to the Meta Quest 3. That's what I want to do. I want to try them both on and see how different the experience is. That's what I really want to do."
You know what? I would be curious to hear your thoughts. So I'm hopeful you get to do exactly that by hook or by crook. And if your employer is paying for it, even better. Um,
No, I'm not going to be paying for it.
yeah, exactly. Well, who would? Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that probably just about does it for our kind of wrap up of all things Summer Game Fest. There were a few other things. I saw a few other sort of streams and showcases here or there that I thought were cool. I did just also want to say, did you play Curse of the Golden Idol?
Yes.
There was a new trailer for Rise of the Golden Idol, and that also has a demo out on Steam that I played.
Oh, nice.
And it is more Golden Idol, but it is if you needed that in your life, it is good. I also wanted to give a shout out to UFO 50 that finally has a release date after I can't remember how long ago it was actually meant to come out. Possessors, which was the Heart Machine game that closed Devolver Showcase, and Citizen Sleeper 2. What was your game of the whole show? If we throw it open to the whole thing, what really wet your whistle?
I'm going to have to I think I'm going to stick with Perfect Dark.
Yep,
But
that's a good shout.
then there's this potential of Star Wars Outlaws, which I'm excited by, and you've made me more excited by some of the things that people have said about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those two are the things that at the moment are, yeah.
I like that because you've got a very short term one and a long term one. You've got like one that's here now and one that represents kind of like the future.
Yes. What about you? What would you go with?
Man,
Killer Bean.
yeah, I'm all about that killer bean. I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna have a tough time. Can I choose more than one?
Yeah, I did. Go for it.
I really want to see what Project C looks like, just because I'm very intrigued by the creatives involved in that. I'd pick out Doom: The Dark Ages.
Yeah, good one. Very good.
I'm not. I wish I was saying Fable, but I'm going to bite my tongue on Fable and instead say I thought Mixtape was one of the strongest first impressions a game made on me, just kind of out of nowhere. And then Gears E-Day. I really want to play another Gears. I'm ready for another Gears game.
Nice.
Even if that's I'll wait before we play one. So yeah. They were our picks from what was I'd say overall very solid and enjoyable week of gaming that hopefully had something, a little bit of something at least for everyone. But of course, always curious to know your thoughts on whether or not you had a kind of a favorite showcase, on the relevance you think that this kind of cobbled together week of gaming has in the industry going forward, and of course, as we just shared, any sort of individual games that kind of caught your eye and what your kind of games of the show were. Give us a shout in the comment section down below. Reach out to us on Twitter, or if you can reach out to us on the Discord. But to do so, you would, of course, have to have the exclusive Discord access, which you can only get by supporting us on Patreon. And it is at this point that I realised I have not yet given a shout out to the fine folk that have supported us on Patreon. The link, for anyone wondering, is patreon.com/SuperShow. There are all kinds of cool, dare I say, benefits if you head over there, from Patreon exclusive podcasts and videos and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, the ability to join the Discord community and chat about stuff like your game of the show with us. There are some names on screen right now of some fine folk that have already gone over there and pledged. But I'd also like to give a personal shout out. Thank you all so much. Apologies for keeping you waiting a little while longer to get your shout outs, your time in the sun. But the spotlight hopefully was well and truly placed upon you just now. And with that, I'd like to say, Jonesy, thank you for joining me on this. How we coming up on 3 hour long podcast? We do this every year, don't we? We recap every single announcement, every single game, and 3 hours later we wonder why we bother.
No, we don't. We love it.
But thank you for your input and expertise and candor and humor and good looks.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for helming this ship all the way to the end.
An absolute pleasure, and thank you for watching and or listening. It's been a fun week. Thank you as well to anyone who joined us for any of the live streams we did, and you can look forward to the return of our regularly scheduled podcasting programming starting from next week. Hopefully we'll see you there, but once again, thanks for watching or listening, and take it sleazy and smell you later.
See ya.
Bye.